Okay.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
That's right.
Okay.
He is right. The green curtain.
Okay, I'd like to call to an order Clayton City Council meeting for Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. Let the record reflect that all council members are present. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so our first item is the consent calendar. Are there any, I think we have some replacement or proposed amendments by Council Member 1 to the minutes here, which is item 3A. Does anyone want to pull any item from the consent calendar? Are there any comments on the consent items?
Just the 3A.
Okay, Vice Mayor Pierce?
Well, as I understand it, this is a suggestion for a verbatim transcription of the comments made by a member of the public. I don't know that that's something that we want to start doing. I honestly think a summary of the comments is in a simple sentence would be advisable. We had, many years ago, had a discussion about verbatim minutes versus summary minutes. And because of the demands on staff time to do verbatim minutes, we had suggested that summary minutes really were more efficient for everyone. And now with the advent of live streaming and videotape and the ability to go look at the video at any time to hear exactly what someone has said, tone of voice, all that sort of thing, I'm wondering if it might not be better to just mark on the tape, and I think Larry or Paul, one of them, already do, when they post the video after the meeting, the agenda is posted with it, and you can click on any agenda item and go directly to the broadcast of that item. I think it would be far better to have summary minutes and go to that link, and maybe the minutes include the spot on the tape if somebody has a problem with it or something, to be able to look at it online yourself. I think we're asking staff at this point to start transcribing a meeting, and I think that is not a wise use of our time and resources. So I would suggest we stay with the existing summary minutes.
Okay.
Well,
Any other comments? Councilmember 1?
I disagree. I don't think that we're asking for verbatim minutes. I mean, certainly the comments that were made were much more extensive than what is being suggested here. When I read through the minutes, I didn't think it captured the substance of the statements that were made. And I think to the extent that we do capture minutes in this fashion, that it's important to capture the substance of the statements that are being made. And in this case, the specific criticism that was leveled in the comments, along with some of the questions that I had that were addressed during a different section, they weren't captured. And I think that it doesn't reflect the sentiment that was offered. And really, when you're looking at the sentiment and the core of the statement that was made, it's missing from when you just read the text as it was originally written. It's certainly not verbatim. There's probably several minutes of dialogue that isn't captured, but I think the main criticism was that when we were talking about parolee housing in the city, there was an extensive discussion that we had in the previous meeting, and when the comments were made, they characterized our discussion about changes to our existing ordinance as, like Jim Crow laws, and is as if we were enacting poll taxes and conducting literacy tests. And I think that sentiment needs to be reflected because when you read through the minutes, as I think most people will read the minutes rather than watch the videos, it does more accurately capture what was said.
Okay, any other comments?
I concur with
Councilmember Diaz.
Vice Mayor in many of the both for-profit and nonprofit boards that I have served, they never went to the detail. It was a summary and to the point of what the essence was and not a verbatim.
And I agree, and that's what this is. My suggestion is not a verbatim, certainly. Verbatim would be several more paragraphs. And when I wrote this suggestion, I did it from memory. And I know that when I sent the suggested edits, our city manager was going to validate whether or not that I had accurately captured the substance or ask that it be done. And I think, well, you could tell me if you disagree that if I misstated anything. But really, when we're talking about the nature of the comments, that really was the main substance of it. It's not verbatim, but it's a summary of what was said.
Okay, are there any other comments?
Well, I'd like to know, excuse me, first of all, from staff and from, I guess, from our city attorney, what is incumbent upon us to do? Is that verbatim? Is it everything? I mean, there's a lot of things that I said in the last city council meeting that is not included in the minutes. It's certainly included in summary. I had an exchange with Mr. Grumman that's not in there. There are a few things, but I don't object to that. What I am worried about is that we're creating busy work when the busy work is already out there, that it's on videotape and can be seen from the live stream. So, and I disagree. I don't think most people do read the agenda. I think most people would tend to watch rather than to read. I certainly would myself. If I wasn't sitting in this position, I'd rather watch the live stream. So, I agree that I think we're creating more busy work than is necessary in that if you read this statement verbatim, if it was verbatim, it's a rather confusing statement. And I suppose reading it, it's like reading an email. You don't know what the actual inflection is, what the tone is. And so I would tend to lean toward wanting to take a look at that video to say, well, what was the intent of this? And how was that said? What was the inflection? Rather than getting a transcribed copy on the agenda. So that's where I'm looking. And again, I go back to the original question with the city attorney, Heather Lee today. How you doing? It's not an April Fool's thing. It's Heather Lee.
That's
okay,
it.
Good. What is incumbent upon us as far as the city? Do we have to take verbatim everything?
There's no obligation to take verbatim minutes. This would be really something within your discretion to decide as a body.
Thank you. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so then I think I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I would move to approve the consent calendar as submitted.
Is there a second?
And this is without the amendment
Right.
or the amended? I'll second that.
So it's been first and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so Councilmember Juan opposed. Okay, then we'll move on to recognitions and presentations. So I think our first presentation is actually the annual report for 2018 by Ms. Jeannie Boyd, who is the president of our Clayton Community Library Foundation. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Catalano. And
Is your mic on by any chance? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Is it?
I don't
Okay.
think it is.
I just heard the squeak, but I didn't.
Well, I moved it down, so it,
No,
That was
I don't
my
think
elbow?
it's turned
short.
on, Janet. Ours weren't.
Can you check if it's on,
Kind
Janet?
of point of order. I'm told that the audio on the live stream is not working
Right now?
right
How'd you
now.
find that out?
Testing?
You know that?
I get emails.
You check emails during our council meetings from other members of the public?
Hello?
They-
Hello?
When they email me, I'll ask. I mean, I'm a public servant.
You're aware that the Brown Act says that we are supposed to be acting for council business so that everybody can see what we're doing, right? So we're not supposed to be communicating with citizens secretly when we're up here, right?
It's not a secret. It's a point of order.
Oh, I understand, but you're aware that Brown Act says that anything and everything we do here as a council, we do so that the audience and everybody can see what we're doing. So we're not supposed to be sending messages or communicating with our citizens privately. Perhaps we can ask the city attorney to provide the Brown Act
I'm aware of the
sections
Brown
there.
Act.
Thank you. Okay, great. So let's see if our audio is working.
It's working.
Okay, perfect. Go.
If I might, just council members, the microphones you have are omnidirectional, which means you have to speak directly almost into them in order to be heard. They're not multi-directional, so they don't pick up sidebar discussions and other things. So just make sure, use of the microphone, you're up on top of the microphone to be heard. We've also adjusted the volume.
Do we
Wonderful.
need a point of order? Do we need a recap then of whatever has been said already?
Probably
regard to the
not.
live
I
stream?
assume that Mr. Napper, can you clarify maybe?
There's no requirement in law that actually your minutes are the official actions of the city. There's no requirement in law to live stream or to tape. So we're not going to stop the meeting in order to try to address a problem in the back. Just to let all of you know, is the equipment in the back room is about 10 years old. We're getting quotes to upgrade that equipment. Don't know if that will solve the live streaming problem, but it certainly will enhance some of the camera as well as some of this. I think the volume is also directed at some of the equipment back there.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just do a better job
Thank
speaking directly to the mic. Ms. Boyd, please go ahead.
Mayor Catalano and city council members, city staff, and members of the audience, it gives me great pleasure tonight to be able to present to you the 2018 annual report for the Clayton Community Library Foundation. In anticipation of celebrating our 25th birthday, the Foundation Board is working to make improvements in the library building as well as planning special events for the birthday celebration on Saturday, March 7th, 2020. The mission of the Clayton Community Library Foundation is to provide funds for materials, furniture, public programs, and to promote volunteer support for the Clayton Community Library, a vital community resource. Fortunately, so many members of the community have agreed that this library is a vital community asset that the original donor board is full of the names of our many donors. Wood from the Keller outbuildings will be used to create a new donor board. One of our longtime generous donors recently donated $10,000. New donors are encouraged to join the CCLF at any of several levels. Beginning in the fall into next year, silver-colored 25th birthday celebration membership cards will be given to everyone who joins or renews their membership. Yikes. A goal is to increase the membership of just over 400 by 25%. The fundraising vice president keeps track of donations so that when members reach the $1,000 level, a plaque with their name is added to the donor board. As our in-library volunteers age and retire, new volunteers join this hardworking crew. In 2018, volunteers worked in the library for just over 5,000 hours. This includes all daily volunteers, the volunteer coordinator, tutors, computer helpers, and many of these dedicated workers came in when the library is short of volunteers who perform all the necessary daily tasks. Often staff members have had to fill it to get the work done. In 2018, we oriented 32 new volunteers with only 18 or 56% still volunteering. The library is always in need of more adult volunteers. The benefits are many, such as new friendships and the satisfaction of giving back to the community. The 2017 independent sector value of volunteer work in California is $29.09 an hour, putting the value of our in-library volunteer workers at $145,450. CCLF shows our appreciation of all these valued volunteers, both adults and students, at a catered spring luncheon, a holiday luncheon, and pizza parties for the students. Book sale workers put in 1,084 hours during the 2 weeks of setup, sorting, and the weekend sale and cleanup. The semi-annual sales brought in just over $13,000. There has been a general downward trend in income for these two sales in recent years. However, our bookstore sales generated just under $3,000, and our online sales brought in over $3,300, due in part to some excellent donations. These two activities bring book sale totals up to over $19,000 for the year. Unfortunately, the number of book sale volunteer workers is down, along with the hours that they have worked. The Clayton Community Library Foundation Executive Board and other supportive members of the community donated an additional 2,155 hours to library activities, including the Clayton Garden Club, book movers and sorters who sort and pack all of the donated materials, Boy Scout Troop 484, and the 4th of July participants. Donations from community organizations allow CCLF to supplement our fundraising activities and give a total of almost $37,000 in support of the library. AAUW, Concord Clayton Valley Sunrise Rotary, Clayton Valley Women's Club, and Clayton Business and Community Association have all donated to the foundation this last year. CBCA gave $6,000 to purchase large print books, which has given a boost to that well-used collection. United Way, local independent charities, generates individual donations and matching gifts from corporate employer charitable programs. Our membership donations were over $8,200. In-kind materials valued at almost $4,000 donated by patrons were added to the collection. Other donations and memorials, in addition to merchandise sales, complete our revenue total. Again, last year, CCLF gave $2,000 to the City of Clayton to support the Sunday open hours for our library. They paid $2,700 for 32 programs attended by almost 800 people. CCLF sent $10,000 to the county library to augment the materials budget. New shelving for the DVDs was purchased, the story room closets were cleaned out, and portable shelving purchased to make room for staff members to store materials for the many children's programs, some of which support and complement the summer reading program, which was Reading Takes You Everywhere. The book choice for the fall program, Clayton Reads, was The Underground Railroad by Colson White. CCLF purchased 150 copies to give to library patrons to read and hopefully pass on to others. A permanent banner was purchased to carry in the 2019 July 4th parade. And in 2018, 33 people worked to prepare the float, the banner, and march in the parade. The Creekside Arts Fest was started in 2004 by Arlene Kakawa-Nielsen, our volunteer coordinator. It continued last year with the theme of the healing power of creativity. This 3-day event was part of the 23rd library birthday celebration, which included musical presentations, live animals, art vendors, a juried art contest, storytelling, dance, and writing. Unfortunately, the interest in this event seems to have diminished some over the years, and the event takes many hours of work and effort, so that it has been decided not to continue with it in the future. Some of our goals for 2019: increase the foundation membership by at least 25% by 2020, recruit more adult volunteer workers, continue to work with the city to upgrade and maintain the library building, our most vital community asset. A new Clayton Community Library website will soon be up and running, hopefully with a new webmaster. There's also a CCLF Facebook page that needs someone to keep it current. The Clayton Community Library Foundation enjoys having a city council representative as a member of our board. We appreciate the support of all the council members and the staff, as well as the work of the maintenance crew to keep the library building at its best. From opening day to this 24th year, the Clayton Community Library has had great support from the Clayton community as well as surrounding communities. In spite of technological changes, people still value what our library has to offer. It is an amazing community asset. Anyone have any questions or comments?
So I think so, yeah, but let me just start. So I think very few people understand kind of how important the foundation is in running our library and how many volunteers you actually rely upon. But if somebody were interested in volunteering, can you remind us what's the minimum age for somebody to volunteer and how would they go about signing up?
Sure. The minimum age is 13, and there are white cards that they can get on the circulation desk. They fill out one of those, and our volunteer coordinator contacts them to see what works best for them.
Perfect. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Pierce.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean. It's always a treat to hear about all the wonderful hours that our library volunteers put in and all that the library adds to the community. I just wanted to share with all of you, I was talking recently with our Congressman, Mark DeSaulnier, and all of you long-timers like me will remember when we first opened this library and what it took to get the doors open to begin with, and the intense negotiations that we had with the county over volunteers. Because prior to our library opening, volunteers were not allowed to do some of the jobs that had formerly been done only by county staff, all of whom were union. And the union fought very hard against us using volunteers, but we couldn't afford to open our library if we had to staff it all with union paid staff members. And so Mark helped us. We all fought hard. We set a new example of how a community library can be run and operated with minimal staff, but with lots of volunteers. And for years and years, we led the county in the number of volunteers that we've had and how efficiently our library has been run with the expert professional staff we get from the county and the ability for them to direct our volunteers to do the work that we would have had to pay for before that would have prevented us having this marvelous asset in our community. And I know Karen does a fabulous job of keeping everything rolling smoothly, and we really appreciate her professional expertise. But without the participation of these volunteers, our library could not be what it is today.
That's right.
And all of the libraries that have come online since have modeled to one extent or another after what we established when we began in 1995. And it's kind of staggering to think that we're looking at 25 years already of having this beautiful asset in our community. And I also want to say thanks to Joyce and Jean and all the others, Marnie and Arlene and all the folks who've been around what seems like to us forever. Right. But since the beginning of this library, we fought hard for it. And went and got the state grants to build it. And, you know, it was just one thing after another. And the years and years you guys put into leading the fundraising and all the wonderful donors that have contributed. And so whatever we can do to help get those volunteer counts back up, because a lot of the folks that have retired from that have earned that retirement from volunteering. And so we need to get a new class of recruits in there that are as dedicated as they have always been. So thank you guys for hanging in there and doing such a fabulous job. This is a true treasure in our community.
Thank you. And just to add to your comments, we have never had a full-time staff. We've always had a 3/5 staff.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's right.
I do have some membership forms for you. I know some of the council members are members of the foundation, but I thought maybe I could pass these along, and the rest of you might want to help raise our foundation numbers.
You bet.
Thank you.
That'd be great. And I think Councilmember Wolf wanted
Yes,
to
and
say
I'm the, first of all, I'm a member, so I don't need to have one of those. Thank you. I'm the representative on the foundation board for the city council. And I just want to encourage everybody to join the foundation. And, you know, I have to say, first of all, you're a fun group. I'm having a good time on the.
We do.
On the yes, and you're a loud group for a library. It's amazing. There's no shushing going on in the meetings, which is nice. But moreover, I think that your last statement here about this is an amazing community asset, and I think that your diligence in trying to keep this thing going is really commendable. And just the fact that I'm sitting in a much more well-lit room today, I think is because of you. And there's no balloon up there. It's been there for like 5-6 years, and it's gone. So anyway, I appreciate all of your vigilance, diligence, whatever you want to say with regard to the repairs we need to do and the things we need to do. And in working with the staff, we want to thank the staff too for coming to our aid whenever we're needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
great, thank you. Any other comments?
Very briefly, I did enjoy my time as the liaison from the City Council to the Library Foundation, and as Council Member Wolf mentioned, they are a very active group, and I'm really disappointed to see that the Creekside event is going to go the way of other things. It's one of those labor-intensive things that, unfortunately, over time, you run out of volunteers. But anyway, looking forward to your 25th anniversary next year.
Thank you.
Arlene could have done that Creekside thing on her own, couldn't you?
Great, thank you. So then we have a couple more certificates of recognition and a proclamation. So if I could have Jeannie come up here. So first, I have a proclamation for a Clayton Community Library Volunteers Week. So I'm going to read it over. So whereas the Clayton Community Library has a total of 51 in-library adult and student volunteers whose work is essential to the support and functioning of the library services. And whereas in-library volunteers contributed 4,188 hours, and the foundation volunteers contributed 2,155 hours in 2018, for a total of 6,343 volunteer hours. And whereas on July 4th, 2018, 33 Clayton Community Library volunteers and patrons promoted the library's summer reading program at the Clayton's Independence Day Parade, highlighting the importance of summer reading and summer library visits. And whereas Clayton Community Library volunteers shelve all the materials at the library, check in return materials, do all mending of materials, read to children, deliver books to homebound patrons, and much more. And whereas the annual Creekside Arts Celebration was held to showcase local artisans, performance, and community groups, as well as to raise funds for library support. And whereas the Clayton Community Library Foundation contributed $37,000 in 2018 for volunteer support and recognition, library materials and furniture, Sunday operating hours, programs for adults, teens, and young children, and the Creekside Arts Celebration expenses. Now, therefore, I, Tuya Catalano, Mayor, on behalf of the Clayton City Council, do hereby declare April 7 through 13, 2019, as the Clayton Community Library Volunteers Week, and urge my fellow citizens to recognize that our Clayton Community Library volunteers are indeed a gift to the community, as we gratefully thank the operational volunteers, tutors, computer helpers, parade volunteers, garden volunteers, homebound deliverers, Creekside Art Celebration volunteers, Creekside Artists, Guild artists, library commissioners, foundation, and board members for their collective outstanding volunteerism.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Great, thank you. And then we have a couple certificates of recognition honoring some of the volunteers who've done many years of service. And I know we have many others in the audience who've served even longer, but today we'd like to recognize Joan Carolyn as a Volunteer of the Year 2019 for 6.5 years of outstanding service. So please come up.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. We'd also like to recognize Megan Day as a Volunteer of the Year 2019 for 5 years of outstanding service. Thank you. And then Jill Day, also a Volunteer of the Year for 2019 for 5 years of outstanding service. And last but not least, Hope Kunin, also a Volunteer of the Year 2019 for 3.5 years of service.
She was not able to come. She's working on a senior project tonight.
Okay, very good. So I'll provide this to one of you and you can...
Can we get a picture of the recipients?
Yes.
You and maybe Joyce and Jean and Karen? Got to send it out to the
Paper, yeah.
You always do.
Tamara couldn't be here tonight, but I told her I'd just see what we can do. Squish together, folks. There you go.
Yep.
Do the grip and grin, you know. Hold your certificates up so we can see them.
There you go.
Yep, they're all right side up even. Jim's a better photographer than I.
Great, thank you very much.
And don't forget the book sale.
Oh, we're not done yet.
So
All
we're
right,
not quite
good.
done yet, yeah. And I think the book sale is going to be April 13 and 14 that weekend. 12, 13, 14. So I do have one more proclamation. If I could have, I think, Jeannie come back up again on behalf of the foundation and the library, or I don't know if Karen wants to come too for moral support. So this is for recognizing the Clayton Community Library as a whole. So I'm going to read this over again. Whereas today's libraries are not just about books, but what they do for and with people. And whereas libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions where people of all backgrounds can come together and connect. And whereas libraries and librarians build strong communities through transformative services, programs, and expertise. And whereas libraries, which promote the free exchange of information and ideas for all, are the cornerstones of democracy. And whereas librarians and library workers partner with other civic organizations to make sure their community's needs are being addressed and met. And whereas libraries are a resource for all members of the community, regardless of age, gender, ethnicity, or background, by offering services and educational resources that transform lives and strengthen communities. And whereas libraries, librarians, library workers, and supporters across America are now celebrating National Library Week. Now, therefore, I, Tuya Catalano, Mayor on behalf of the Clayton City Council, do hereby proclaim April 7 through 13, 2019 as Clayton Community Library Week, and hereby encourage all residents to visit our wonderful library this week and to take advantage of the array of library resources available. Great, thank you. So then we will move on to reports. So we don't have anybody from the Planning Commission or the Trails and Landscaping Committee. So if we could go to any report by city staff. Mr. Napper?
Thank you, Mayor Catalano. The only thing is just to introduce the individual sitting to my right. This is Heather Lee. She is from Best and Krieger law firm, and she's sitting in tonight for Mala Subramanian.
You might want to introduce.
And what
David,
happened to
too.
Mindy? She's not looking good.
Mindy took a great transformation, and sitting to Heather's right is our interim community development director, David Woltering. He formerly served as a community development director for the city of Clayton, and then he decided to abandon us and go to San Bruno. And now he's enjoying retirement, but this is what retirement looks like.
Great.
We're glad to have him.
Great. Thank you, Heather, and welcome back, David. So then we'll go on to city council reports. Councilmember Diaz, would you like to start?
You want me to start?
Oh, it doesn't matter, one end or the other.
I have two items that I want to mention. On Friday, the 22nd of March, I spent a wonderful day with our county fire department. Started off, first of all, it was raining that day, and we were out at Station 10, which is right next to the training center on Treat. We had a change of command. Jeff Carmen retired after 30-plus years as the chief, and most recently as our chief for the past 5.5 years. He was replaced by Louis Burchard, who was the deputy chief and now takes over that post. But it gave me the opportunity to reflect back over 5+ years. Those of you that may not recall the downturn that we had here, and our beloved Station 11 fortunately remained open, but it was only for a few hours per day. But through Jeff and specifically Lon Gaish, who was the assistant chief, and a committee that I headed with then council member Dave Shuey, we fought hard, and when they got some resources back into the till at the county level, we were able to get Station 11 reopened, because that is an important asset, because probably better than 70% of the calls that are responded to, in case you didn't know it, are medical emergencies, not necessarily fires. And so having it close by, and one of the major things that Jeff Carmen accomplished was that he merged with the American response team, the ambulance service, and now they became an integral part of the county and the county fire department, and that was a tremendous move forward. I want to make one other comment about Jeff, who I got to know over this time. I don't know if you read about it in the paper, but his last day on the job, he actually went out and responded to a fire. This guy is dedicated, and he brought tremendous skill set to the county. We're going to miss him, but Louis Burchard, who was his deputy, is taking his place and will continue that leadership. And finally, later that evening, they had a wonderful retirement dinner for Jeff over at the Back 40 restaurant, which was another well-attended event. A lot of officials from around the area, plus a number of the county staff. That completes my, oh, wait a minute. Forgot one other thing. On the 28th, I went down to Southern California and participated in the League of California Cities Environmental Committee, which I am a member of and represent the city on that. We had a wonderful day down in Orange County hearing about the latest things, not only from the state level and the issues going on up there, but then on very important environmental matters. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wolf?
I have only one thing. The day after the last city council meeting, I attended the Oktoberfest meeting, of which I will be one of the co-chairs this year. And I did have a memorial to attend, and then I went off on a little vacation to Chicago, which nobody should do.
Not at
It was
this time of
cold
year.
there.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Pierce?
Yes, thank you. I attended the Seroptimus International Luncheon, the Diablo Vista chapter, which is Concord and Clayton primarily. some of Pleasant Hill as well, and they were honoring one of our own Clayton residents and participants in many of our committees, Karen Kaplan. And they honor a lot of women and provide opportunities, particularly for younger women, for students and things like that, to better their lives through education and that sort of thing. So that was a lovely luncheon. I had a Contra Costa Transportation Authority meeting that same evening, and we went over our budget for the next year. Everything looks good. Sales taxes look to remain flat for the next coming year or so. So we're in the black completely and getting projects done. We have accomplished 25 years worth of projects in about 10 years. And so we have accomplished them through bonding, but the bonds are being paid off much more quickly than originally anticipated, which will save us additional dollars, and getting the projects done ahead of time also makes them less costly to do as the price of labor and everything else continues to go up, and we have the benefit of using those projects now rather than waiting 20 years for them. We had 3 meetings of the Association of Bay Area Governments. Our legislation committee met to go over much of the legislation going on in Sacramento right now, particularly to do with housing. And I will be chairing the Regional Housing Legislative Task Force for the Bay Area. And we will be having weekly meetings on all of the legislation going on in Sacramento and giving feedback to both the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Association of Bay Area Governments. And this will be comprised of approximately 30 members, elected members from various jurisdictions, people who are not already on either ABAG or MTC. And so those meetings will commence on Friday morning. And we will be meeting sometimes in the daytime, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening. But for the next about 3 months, those will be weekly meetings that we'll be having. And also attended the Horizons Plan Bay Area 2050 workshop that was held over at the Embassy Suites last week. It was a really well done workshop. I wish you had had the opportunity to make it over there. I sent out an email about it. I was hoping you might be able to make it, but it was well done, and there will be more in the future before we get done with the process. But lots of good information there as well. That's it.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wan?
Yes, so as we're well aware, a student was hit by a vehicle a couple weeks ago in front of Mount Diablo Elementary. I spoke with a number of folks regarding the incident and a number of interested parties, and I think there's a lot of community interest in that. So I did take time to understand what people's concerns were. Because when I was dropping off my own student at the school, I had an opportunity to talk with Principal Kissinger over there and about her concerns, some of her proactive efforts, which I've communicated to the rest of the council on, as well as just potential things that we could look to in the future. So.
Great, thank you. And I think you and I talked a little bit about maybe doing that as part of the committee as well. So thank you. So a couple of things for me. I also attended the California League of Cities, one of their committee meetings, but I was there in Orange County on Friday, March 29th, in the Transportation, Communication, and Public Works Policy Committee. Then last night, attended the CBCA Art and Wine Committee meeting. The Art and Wine Festival is coming up on April 27th through 28th, and they are definitely looking for volunteers, and anybody can sign up for a couple-hour shift by going to the Clayton CPCA website. And then I also want to report on one of our other committee activities, which is the Do the Right Thing Committee, which is Councilmember Wolf and myself. So we have been talking about, Councilmember Wolf and I have been talking about this for a couple months probably now, about expanding the program a little bit. So the Do the Right Thing program is a program that was created probably 7, 8, 9 years ago by former council member and two-time mayor Hank Stratford. And I think all the council members at that time and subsequently have endorsed that program very well. And I think it's been a great program for our community. But Councilmember Wolf and I in the Do the Right Thing committee have talked about expanding that program to also cover adults. So right now what we do is we obviously recognize the students in our schools for the 6 different character traits. So what we wanted to do is to propose a pilot program for 2019 to recognize some of the adults in our community who are doing the right thing by making a difference in our community. I think there are a lot of outstanding and exemplary and inspiring people in our community, including some of the library volunteers we heard of tonight. But overall, a lot of people who really make our community a better place and inspire the rest of us to do better. So we are going to be, as the subcommittee, I think, spearheading that and kind of seeing if we could do this as a pilot program. So I think our first step is really looking out to the public for their help in providing those nominations. And we've talked about having the first recognition be an outstanding teacher, mentor, or a coach. So somebody who's doing really an excellent or inspiring job in our community, not looking for recognition, but just doing an outstanding thing, doing the right thing and making a difference in our community either as a teacher, mentor, or a coach. And they do not have to be a Clayton resident, but they could also be somebody who just works with our kids or adults or our community members. So in order to nominate somebody, we're hoping that we'll get some nominations, essentially providing for the name of the person who should be nominated, a kind of a brief description as to why they should be nominated, and then the name of the person who's nominating them. And you can email those nominations. We've created a separate email address, which is claytonmakingadifference@gmail.com. So we're hoping to get some nominations through that.
Cool.
So that concludes my report and all other reports as well. Mr. Napper.
Thank you, Mayor. As you were outlining the Making a Difference program that you are apparently launching tonight, may I suggest that perhaps the subcommittee or the ad hoc committee come up with some written guidelines as to how that program is perceived to work and so forth, and then have it officially come back to the City Council for approval. That's the way it was done with the Do the Right Thing, and I think that's helpful so that everyone knows exactly what is the foundation for this new program.
Yeah, that would be great, and we'll bring it back, I think, on April 16th of the next year. That'd be great. Perfect. Then we'll move on to item 6, which is public comment on any non-agenda items. So this is the opportunity in the meeting when any member of the public can address any item that's not on our agenda tonight. I do have one speaker card, and if anyone else would like to speak, please just fill out a card. I have one card from Ms. Stanaway.
Ann Stanaway, 1553 Haviland Place, Clayton. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have 2 items tonight. One, spontaneous, as you guys were discussing things earlier. But the first one is, in my hands is an email from Clayton's current mayor containing incorrect information, which is apparently being circulated in City Hall. Mayor Catalano emailed me on March 19 in response to concerns I raised over parking in designated fire lanes in Haviland Court. She emailed to rebut my remarks made at a previous city council meetings. However, the mayor failed to recognize that there is ample evidence that all of Westwood streets are and have always been fire lanes by design. I demand to know where Mayor Catalano received the information for her position that Haviland Court is not a fire lane. California mandates clear fire apparatus access roads, aka fire lanes, to every, quote, building, structure, or portion, unquote. So mandated in California Fire Code, section 503.1.1. Additionally, I quote from the City of Clayton's own records, quote, because of the narrow width. Westwood streets are fire lanes and parking should be prohibited, which it has been for some time, unquote. Furthermore, California Fire Code Section 503.4 states, quote, fire apparatus access roads shall not be obstructed in any manner, including the parking of vehicles, unquote. The matter is settled. The city must enforce California Fire Code as adopted. No discretion is accorded. I am very concerned that Mayor Catalano and others in City Hall do not view public safety with the appropriate forethought. See the big picture. The safety of Westwood affects the lives of 1.2 million people in Contra Costa County. By not enforcing parking restrictions, which are in place to ensure that fire vehicles can quickly access our neighborhoods in the event of emergencies, Clayton displays a serious disdain for public safety. I am also concerned that some in City Hall seek to muzzle me now, portraying an honest whistleblower falsely and negatively to advance their own agendas. I caution you not to try to deflect these serious public safety concerns by attacking my credibility. Place your focus on public safety and not on disparaging my reputation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address? Go ahead.
Hi, council members. I'm Chris Creston. I live at 1212 Mitchell Keenan Road. This is my wife, Angel.
Tip the microphone up so it picks you up a little better.
Thank you.
Way up. You're tall.
I'm at 1212 Mitchell Keenan Road. This is my first time here, so thanks for hearing me out. As Jeff kind of mentioned, so we're right by where that accident happened, and probably about a month before, I posted on Nextdoor about people speeding down the street, which a lot of people commented on and agreed with, that there's a major traffic issue happening on our street. And my wife and I thought long and hard about solutions and what could it do. You know, we talked speed bumps and extra stop signs, you know, more, you know, patrolling, passing out tickets. And for us, what we thought would be best if you're on Mitchell Canyon Road and you were going to make a right-hand turn on Pine Hollow, if there is a no right-hand turn from this time frame, like say morning commute time, that would eliminate a lot of the travelers doing that drive in the morning from traveling down the street and speeding. Likewise, on the other side, if you're on Pine Hollow and you're going to make a left on Mitchell Canyon Road, to have a no left-hand turn from the afternoon commute times. So it wouldn't shut down the roads completely. It wouldn't shut down quarry traffic. It wouldn't do any of those things. To us, or at least to me, it would stop the commuters from using our neighborhood road as a raceway. Because all they're trying to do is cheat Clayton Road and Ignacio Valley. So that's kind of what we were thinking. Something would be great. My wife can hardly pull into our driveway. People speed around us when we're just trying to back in. So hopefully you guys could do something about it. That'd be great. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. I think Ms. Denslow.
Pass your blue card to the city clerk here. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just be brief. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things based on some of the responses that I heard earlier in the meeting. So at our last meeting on the 19th, I read something that I was very passionate about. I heard Councilmember Wolf and others say that they weren't sure of the context. So to make that very clear, I'm an advocate of civil rights. I study civil rights. I've lived in the South, and I've seen firsthand the long-term impact of some of the decisions in the past have had on those communities in Louisiana and Mississippi. Living down there for those 4 years changed my life for forever on the perspectives of things like inclusion. So the comments that I made, in regard to the Jim Crow laws were simply a question about whether we were finding ways to exclude people. And if we were, how are we doing that in a different way than what has been done in the past? And I said that to challenge our thinking, not necessarily to call anybody out. Now, I said that on the 19th. On the 22nd, I put out a post on Nextdoor to ask people if they were interested in citizens coming together and to talk about solutions for the other neighborhoods other than Regency for how they're going to be impacted once the parking permits come into place. The intent of that, I try to make very clear, was to work constructive solutions and ideas that a lot of them we had talked about during the ad hoc committee with Councilmember Wolf and Juan. And that's the intent of that at all. That was the 22nd. Since the 22nd, I've gotten a number of people responding on Nextdoor. I've gotten a number of text messages. I've gotten a number of angry Nextdoor IMs, and that's fine. That's fine. I've also had 6 different residents send me emails saying that they feel like they can't speak up because they're concerned that people are going to send them emails, are going to harass them. They've shared with me emails and text messages of other neighbors harassing them for having a difference of opinion. They've thanked me for speaking up and putting this group together. But all of that aside, the whole intention of this is really just to try and find a constructive solution. It's not intended for anything else. It's not intended to take away the parking permits. And so then when I come in today and I hear that Councilmember Juan and Diaz are talking about doing something that's an unprecedented thing in the community where you want to put what I read in more detail than your own comments, it makes me concerned for the rest of the Clayton citizens that maybe the ones who have been emailing me about being scared to have a voice have a real issue. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the council? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Then I think we'll move on to our public hearings. Our first item is item 7A, which is a public hearing to consider the introduction and first reading of the proposed city-initiated ordinance number 485, amending Clayton Municipal Code section 15.08.040, G, regulating temporary non-commercial signs on private properties. And I know this item was already once before us and then was referred to the Planning Commission, so we've already had some discussion and some staff report on that, but I think we'll have our new Community Development Director provide some additional insight.
Good evening, Mayor Catalano and members of council. Temporary non-commercial signage was discussed last by council at your February 5th, 2019 meeting. At that meeting, council discussed policies regarding temporary non-commercial signage pertaining to individual sign size and aggregate sign size limitations. Council gave formal direction to staff to provide for consideration of an amendment to the city's municipal code sign provisions for temporary non-commercial signage to limit individual sign size to 16 square feet and no aggregate size limit. Across from me on the far wall is a 4x4 area that indicates the signage that could be allowed. Now, keep in mind, that's the maximum, but it could be 3x4, it could be some other dimension up to 16 square feet. As council directed, staff brought this matter forward to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission considered the proposed amendments based on your suggestions and direction at its March 12th, 2019 meeting. Commissioners discussed the proposed amendments at length, wanting to balance the fundamental rights and interests of assuring freedom of speech as guaranteed under the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, while at the same time assuring acceptable community aesthetics and avoiding blight. There was clear support by commissioners to assure First Amendment rights for freedom of speech. But uncertainty and concerns were raised by commissioners about the absence of an aggregate size limit on signage. The issue for commissioners, or some commissioners, being the only limit would be on individual sign size, as we see across the room, at a maximum of 16 square feet, with a separation requirement between individual signs of 42 inches. Otherwise, there would be no limit on the number of signs, the location of signs, window, exterior elevation, ground or rooftop, the duration of how long the signs could be displayed, or the overall aggregate size of all the signs placed on a private property. It was understood by commissioners that individual signs could be various dimensions, up to a maximum of 16 square feet in area. Not being able to reach a consensus to balance the interests of assuring the described First Amendment rights while assuring an acceptable level of community aesthetics and avoiding blight, the Planning Commission adopted a resolution of no recommendation. That's in your packet. It should be noted the Reed versus Town of Gilbert case, which staff looked to in terms of providing guidance, is in terms of bringing our sign provisions up to date and addressing the issue of content neutrality, which was really the basis for this as described in the staff report of this discussion. Reed versus Town of Gilbert indicates that sign content should be neutral, but it did indicate that local jurisdictions could decide on size, building materials, lighting, moving parts, and portability. And as previously indicated by the city attorney, the courts have upheld jurisdictions' restrictions related to sign size and the aggregate size of the total number of signs on a property. A maximum aggregate of 80 square feet has been indicated by staff as being supported by the courts in the past. Given the Planning Commission's struggle with the matter of not having an aggregate size limit, the Council may want to revisit establishing an aggregate size area, balancing the concern of avoiding blight and better assuring acceptable community aesthetics, while at the same time assuring First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. The current proposal in your staff packet to amend the city's sign provisions would establish only a maximum individual sign size limit of 16 square feet and otherwise, as I mentioned previously, no limit on the number, location, duration of display, or aggregate signage area of temporary non-commercial signs on private property. In terms of fiscal impact, our staff reports typically provide you feedback on fiscal impact. We would anticipate what's before you would be handled as a code enforcement matter and handled by our code enforcement staff without any additional need for staff resources. And that would be the case whether you go forward with the 16 square foot limit on the maximum sign area or add to that, perhaps, an aggregate size limit overall on private property. Tonight, our recommendation is to move forward with the ordinance 485, for introduction and first reading to amend Chapter 15.08 sign provisions that restricts temporary non-commercial signs to a maximum size up to 16 square feet in area. That proposed ordinance is included in your agenda packet. Staff also in this presentation provided other information for your consideration as well in terms of the aggregate. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions or clarifications only from staff?
Yeah,
Councilmember
I'm a
Wolf.
little confused because when this came before us the last time, the city attorney, and I think we had a rather lengthy discussion with regard to the aggregate size. So just to be clear, now we're able to set an aggregate size, an aggregate area.
These to come in now.
Yeah.
My recollection, council member, is that the city attorney indicated that she was comfortable, even at that last meeting, with an aggregate of 80, square feet. And it was the city council that decided, after significant discussion, that not to do with any aggregate. So it isn't a matter the city attorney has changed the position. I think Mr. Woltering is just making certain that the city council wishes to continue to hold no limitation on the aggregate signage.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, I think
It takes a while for it to pop in.
that we would want to make sure that there were sufficient findings added if an aggregate was something that you wanted to consider as part of the approval.
Okay, thank you.
Great, any other questions? Vice Mayor Pierce?
Just out of curiosity, when the Planning Commission had their discussion, 42 inches of separation, what does that mean and how did they come up with that number?
The Planning Commission didn't specifically come up with that number. That number was provided to the Planning Commission by staff based on our code. So in terms of separation between individual signs, the separation would need to be 42 inches.
David, could I just ask, is that already in the code? Is that what you're saying?
I believe it is I discussed this with former Community Development Director Mindy Gentry. She indicated that that was a provision in the code and that she had provided that information to the commission in terms of guidance with respect to if there were a larger number of signs placed on a property, what might that look like? And Ms. Gentry indicated that there would be a requirement based on current standards for 42 inches of separation.
Looks like that's already looks like it's in section 15.08.080B. That includes the 42
Thank you.
inch.
And Vice Mayor, I don't think you're thinking what happened, because I don't recall that coming up in our prior discussions either.
No, I don't either. And it really isn't germane to the issue. It just was sort of one that was curious. And I assume that applies to all signs.
Right, because you can't regulate the content of the sign.
Not just the non-commercial signs. It's everything. So I get that. I just find it's interesting. Our aesthetics allow us to do that, but the law doesn't allow us to limit the sign size
Certainly,
for
but
the same aesthetic kind of consideration. It's rather ironic. I will say I remain disappointed that the law will not allow us to control some of the aesthetics in our town. However, I am convinced that based on precedent in the law, that we can no longer do that. And therefore, that was the reason I believe I made the motion last time to go with the 16 square foot per sign and no aggregate. I don't want to get challenged, but I will tell you, I will go ahead and support that, and I will hope that our citizens have more wisdom and more taste and more discretion to allow what is placed on their own property. I think they are going to rise up if someone decides to take this to the max. I think they will object vehemently, and we will have to defend it by citing the law. But I'm hopeful that future folks wanting to put in non-commercial signs for any reason, temporary non-commercial signs, will have the same amount of aesthetic discretion in our community and not push this to the max. I don't think we want to look like other communities during certain times of the year. And so I will remain of the opinion that we should stay with the six.
Let me open up public comment first. And
Okay. No, I'm not going to make a motion.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just stating that my personal opinion is, I think this is really sad. And I realize now you just asked for questions, but anyway.
Any other questions or clarifications? Seeing none, let's open up for public comment. I don't have any.
Mayor, excuse me, open the public hearing.
I'm sorry, I'm open the public hearing and public comment as well. I don't have any speaker cards, but if anybody would like to address the council, please step up. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the
Close the public hearing.
close the public hearing too, and for any further discussion or opinions. Councilmember Juan.
When this first came before us, I voted no. I'm not in favor of limits of the First Amendment. I do find it odd that our city attorney at the time recommended, their recommendation was no individual limit but an aggregate limit, and we went completely the other direction with no aggregate limit but an individual limit. In the notes that are included in the agenda packet, the memo describes that the establishing a limit does carry some legal risk, and I think I find it odd that the council collectively is more accepting of certain risks in this matter than they are in others. I maintain the position that any restriction on speech should be looked at with heavy scrutiny, and while it is supportable that we would meet the intermediate scrutiny test for a content neutral, as well as the other 5 prongs of the analysis, I would caution and say that any time that we're restricting speech, that we should be very well prepared to defend why we want to limit someone's ability to speak. And I would not do so under virtually any circumstance.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Well, I don't see it as a free speech issue at all. I'm in favor of free speech. I don't really care what people put on their signs. I just would be in favor of limiting the size, limiting the font, but I don't limit what people want to say. It may be distasteful to me, and I may have to have a talk with my neighbor if something that size goes up across from my house, which would be unfortunate. But when it comes to this being a free speech issue, I just don't see it. I think that, and I think we have the legal support to be able to hold up to any challenge with regard to this, and I don't see any reason why we can't go back to what we discussed originally and go to a sign that size or 16 square feet, and we can discuss the aggregate, but that's where I'm at.
Okay, Councilmember Diaz, any comments? Vice Mayor Pierce, any comments? Further?
I made my comment.
Okay. So I'll make a couple of comments too. I mean, I definitely care deeply about the aesthetics and the small town feel that we have in our community, and we absolutely have the ability to control signs as long as the regulations is content neutral. I absolutely also support the First Amendment, and I'm actually very saddened to see and hear that the type of divisiveness we had during the election season seems to be still continuing, and I think we as all citizens can do better and allow all voices and all opinions to be heard without any fear of intimidation, and it's sad to hear that that may still be continuing. But that said, like I said, I absolutely support the First Amendment and the freedom of speech. That does not mean that we need to allow large billboards the size of garage doors in our residential communities, and allowing that type of blight and excessive signage when you actually can limit the size seems to me to be contrary to sort of the type of aesthetics and small town setting we want to have. So further. I mean, I think the First Amendment, it is a fundamental right, but it's not an absolute right. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said over and over again that you can have time, place, and manner restrictions as long as they're content neutral. We did talk at our last meeting, which was February 5th, and I just glanced at the staff report as well. We did talk extensively about how the individual size limit of 16 square feet was within those parameters and acceptable limits, so I'm comfortable with that. And I certainly would hope as well that we don't have excessiveness, if you will, and I don't care what any sign says and what content it has, but I do think we can regulate the signage. So I'm happy continuing with the position we had at our original hearing.
Just for clarification, I think the content neutral test under intermediate scrutiny is just one aspect of the test. There's an additional 5 prongs of analysis that need to be done even for content neutral. So I don't think that content neutral alone is saving for us. One of the main requirements is that restrictions be as least I forget the exact language, but it's something like in the least intrusive way possible. And so I think that when we do these types of limits if we're going to make the argument that we're combating blight, which however loosely that's defined, then we have to also make the assertion that restricting people's ability to speak in the manner that they wish is the least intrusive way possible. And I guess our city attorney can chime in if I have the 5 aspects of intermediate scrutiny over free speech restrictions correct. But it's not simply just content neutral. That's just the first test.
Okay. And if I could ask actually the city attorney to opine, because I think we talked about this extensively, specifically as to whether or not we can impose a limit on individual signs. And I think at the last hearing, we said that we could limit it up to 16 square feet per sign.
That's correct, and the case law supports that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Vice Mayor Pierce.
So I think the final decision is ours. We have the right to, and the legal precedent to say that a 16 square foot limit on individual signs is defensible. That doesn't mean anyone has to use a sign that large. They could continue to use much smaller signs if they want to be more aesthetically pleasing. However, we can defend 16 square feet. I hear the concerns about aggregate. If someone were to use the 16 square foot sign, they could get approximately 5 of that size per property if we went with an 80 square foot aggregate, approximately. I looked at the front of my yard, which is visible to the public, and without going to the roof, which I think would be somewhat absurd, but I guess it's legal. I'm not really sure that our other building codes allow such temporary things on our roofs, but nonetheless, it would be practically side by side. And if we have a 42-inch separation rule for signs, it would run pretty much from one end of my property to another. And you could do a Burma shave type sign. We were talking about that on the way in earlier this evening. You know, the first part on one sign and the second part on the next. And you could make a message that ran the entire width of a property if you really wanted to. So I don't think we're making a restriction on free speech. I certainly would not be in favor of any restrictions to free speech. That said, the determination that we have to make is, do we want an aggregate limit, as suggested at our last meeting, of perhaps 80 feet, or do we just want to leave it unlimited and say whatever fits? That's a decision we have to make. And I think at this point, I will go ahead and venture a motion that we accept the language as suggested, that is a per sign limit of 16 square foot with no aggregate.
If I might, Vice Mayor, if that's where you're headed, then that's the ordinance that's in the staff report. And so therefore, you don't need to make a motion for that. You would then ask for it to be introduced.
I'm getting ready to read that
okay.
language.
Thank you.
So I would move to approve ordinance number 485 for introduction with the finding that this ordinance will not result in a significant adverse environmental impact.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, so Councilmember Juan opposed.
Just a second. I'm sorry to be difficult, but I think the motion was not to
introduce the ordinance.
Well, but you first have to ask the city clerk to read it by title and number
all right.
only.
I missed that number. Yep. Okay.
Do we want to rescind the prior vote?
Yes. No, I don't want her to read the whole thing. So
Right, that's what
I would move to have the city clerk read ordinance number 485 by title and number only and waive further reading.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
So that passes unanimously. City clerk, please.
Ordinance number 485, an ordinance amending chapter 15.08 of the Clayton Municipal Code regarding sign provisions.
Okay, I would now move to approve ordinance number 485 for introduction with the finding the ordinance will not result in a significant adverse environmental impact.
Second.
So it's been first and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Councilmember Juan. So then that passes on the first reading, and it will obviously come back to us for a second reading. That moves us into item 8A, which is the discussion and city council policy direction concerning the content and parameters of an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And I think we have a staff report from our new community development director.
Mayor Catalano and members of council, what I'd like to do is start off with a brief introduction of this item and then move to the PowerPoint that we have prepared for this item. In recent years, the state of California has passed legislation which finds accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, to be a valuable form of housing for various segments of the state's population, including family members, students, the elderly, in-home health care providers, the disabled, and others seeking below-market rate housing. An ADU is a secondary dwelling unit with complete independent living facilities for one or more persons and generally takes 3 or 4 different forms as follows. An ADU can be detached. The unit is separated from the primary structure. It can be attached. The unit is attached to the primary structure. It can be repurposed existing space within a primary residence converted into an independent living unit. It can also be a junior accessory dwelling unit, similar to repurposed space with various streamlining measures required by the state of California. The passage of the various laws by the state legislature has relaxed requirements to develop accessory dwelling units for the purpose of encouraging the development of this type of housing by property owners. The state has determined ADUs to be an essential part of California's housing supply and an important component in the effort to address the state's housing crisis. Accessory dwelling units can provide a lower cost housing option to meet the needs of many of the state's existing and future residents. ADUs can be built in existing neighborhoods on existing parcels, thereby avoiding or reducing land costs. Additionally, there could be a rental income opportunity for the property owner. As a result of the passage of the ADU laws by the state, Clayton's Municipal Code Chapter 17.47, second dwelling units, is null and void. The state laws modify many of the provisions in Chapter 17.47. Clayton is not required to adopt a new ordinance to reflect the state changes. But if it does not, then the City of Clayton is compelled to apply the state's standards in Government Code Section 65852.2 for request to construct accessory dwelling units in this community. In other words, Clayton would be required to follow explicitly the state's regulations. In order to preserve a measure of local control, the City Council may want to consider adopting its own ADU regulations and ordinance and take advantage of where the state does allow discretion. The City of Clayton adopted general plan housing element promotes the development of this type of housing. I should point out that state law does require a ministerial, non-discretionary review process for ADUs and a decision to be rendered within 120 days of a jurisdiction receiving an application for an ADU. Staff has prepared a PowerPoint to review with the City Council approximately 9 issue areas where the city could have some discretion in developing a new ADU ordinance. The structure of the PowerPoint uses the city's now null and void second dwelling units ordinance as a baseline, provides a description of applicable new state law provisions, and then propose policy questions for council discussion and feedback. If so directed, staff would use council feedback to do further research and analysis and return to the Planning Commission to initiate the process for a new accessory dwelling unit ordinance for the City of Clayton. In this PowerPoint that staff has prepared, there's some initial information that I've spoken about already in this brief introduction, but I wanted to provide you kind of a quick overview and then move into the PowerPoint. And the purpose really is to share some issues with you and to get your feedback. And in many cases, I'll point out that staff will need to do additional research, and we would come back with additional information. But the idea tonight is to get kind of a sense of, is this something you want to pursue, a local ordinance, ADU ordinance, 1, and 2, in terms of some of the topics or issues that I'll present in the PowerPoint, what's some of your initial feedback that we can use to start putting together a draft ordinance? So that's the purpose of tonight's meeting on this item. I'm going to run through this PowerPoint. The first few pages will be a little bit of repetition, and I'll focus on maybe highlights of those pages. Obviously, the idea of ADUs is to provide for additional housing in our state at this time. State legislation that's been passed includes the provisions, the laws that you see, the bills that you see on this PowerPoint slide. I mentioned our current second dwelling unit ordinance is null and void. What's important, though, is that the state does provide areas for discretion, for local discretion. So in terms of certain areas of parking, height, setbacks, lot coverage, landscape, architecture review, etc., there could be standards provided locally to guide the construction and placement of ADUs here in the City of Clayton. There are specific provisions in the adopted housing element that promote, at that time, using that language, second dwelling units, which would apply to ADUs. So the idea is City of Clayton already has in its adopted housing element measures, policy and measures, implementation measures to go forward with second dwelling units. Let me go back to this one here. I mentioned earlier in my presentation that ADUs really provide for independent living situations, and the more detailed definition is there in the slide. An efficiency unit, as defined in the California Building Code, which is at least 220 square feet, is also a second dwelling unit, or now an ADU. A manufactured home could be an ADU as well. So here's an initial question, and what I'll do is put these questions out there with a definition and then the question to follow, and then there can be some discussion among council and maybe some feedback provided back to staff, and we as staff can perhaps provide some clarification or information to you as you may have questions. So the first area really has to do with the fact that the minimum at this time would be 220 square feet, which is the efficiency unit. There is the allowance, though, to go lower, to have an ADU be as small as 150 square feet. And it could include a partial bathroom and or kitchen. So let me go back here and look at that for a minute, and maybe if you could discuss that a little bit in terms of your thoughts in terms of maybe a lower limit on ADUs.
What would it be helpful, since I do want to take public comment as well, so maybe, is there anything else in here other than the individual ones? I mean, I'm wondering if we should take public comment and then just go through these one item at a time, be able to discuss them, or?
Maybe we go through them all first and then take public comment, and then we can discuss.
Okay.
I think that would put everything out on the table. Otherwise, the public doesn't have a real basis for public comment.
Yeah, so what, if you can maybe run through all of them right now, and then we'll take public comment and then bring it back one at a time.
That sounds great. So I'll just kind of go right through without questions or clarifications, correct? Okay, great. Policy question 2, location. Jurisdictions can limit the construction of ADUs based on adequacy of water and sewer services. So that's something to be aware of. Again, in terms of the state legislature is very clear. Local communities should not put undue restrictions or encumbrances in the way of being able to build ADUs. The next area of question and policy question is, we have various lot sizes in the city of Clayton, and for new detached ADUs not within a structure, remember they can be detached or within the structure, but for detached, should there be a provision indicating that perhaps there's only one ADU per lot? There could be an ADU within a primary structure. There could be a second ADU as a detached unit. So that's something to be thinking about. And there could be even thought in terms of the various lot sizes within the city of Clayton in terms of linking the number of ADUs to lot sizes. So question is, could there be two, one internal, one external, one detached, and what about lot size? How does that play in terms of the various lot sizes within the community? Setbacks, policy question 3. The second dwelling units ordinance really requires that the second dwelling units would need to match the setbacks of the district where they were being proposed. Now again, the second dwelling units provision of the code is null and void. But again, we're trying to say, well, what was the baseline, or what could we be thinking we had in place in terms of feedback from all of you? There is the opportunity, the state does provide the opportunity to control locally setbacks with some exception. So for example, as you'll see on the slide, if there's an existing garage that's being proposed for conversion and it has a setback less than 5 feet, that's okay per state law. We can't require a greater setback for that garage conversion. However, if one would want to, a property owner would want to add a second floor, a second story, then that second floor or second story could be set back 5 feet. So that the point here, I think, with policy question 3 is that there are some provisions for us to be thinking about in terms of setbacks. We could either require that ADUs match the setbacks of our existing districts, or it could be something less, like accessory structures have lesser setbacks in our districts than the primary units. So something to think about. That's described here in more detail. And again, I think I've covered this already in terms of the information I've provided to you. Policy question 4, unit size. CMC previously limited second dwelling units to 45% of habitable floor area and between 250 and 750 square feet, ministerially approved. And the state, as of 2003, required that local jurisdictions provide ministerial approval for second dwelling units up to a certain point. Clayton did that. And then going larger, if a property owner wanted 1,000 square feet, then they would need to go to planning commission review. So there was that kind of two-pronged process: smaller, ministerial, larger, going to planning commission. The state is indicating at this time in the state regulations that an ADU shall not exceed 50% of the proposed existing primary dwelling unit space, living area, or 1,200 square feet. What we're finding is that many jurisdictions that have gone forward already to adopt their ordinances in terms of complying with the intent of state law are allowing ministerially, without discretionary review, somewhere between 800 and 1,200 square feet for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and that seems to be acceptable from the state. Questions here could be in terms of the 1,200 square feet. The state is indicating up to 1,200 square feet. Would the city of Clayton be interested in a larger, more than 1,200 square foot size of ADU? Question. And then what about just in terms of the ADU state standard there, not to exceed 50% of the proposed existing primary dwelling living area or 1,200 square feet. Again, 800 to 1,200 square feet is what a lot of other jurisdictions are doing. You might want to keep that in mind. More on that here on this slide. I think I've covered probably most of that already. Policy question 5, height. And here the provision is detached ADUs could be 15 feet or 1 story, whichever is less. And that's the state standard. 15 feet or 1 story, whichever is less. Accessory structures here in Clayton can go up to 16 feet in height. So a question would be, would we want to consider the ADU height matching accessory structures? Or let's look at the CMC, the previous second dwelling unit ordinance, which allowed for ADUs not to exceed a single family dwelling or 2 stories. So again, in terms of height, ADU height, there's discretion, local discretion for you to think about. And more information there, pretty much what I've just described. Next policy question, off-street parking. The CMC previously required one off-street space per bedroom at a minimum of one space if the unit did not contain a bedroom. So basically, a minimum of one space for the ADU. State law, in terms of parking, basically indicates that the local jurisdiction cannot require any parking for an ADU if the ADU is within 1/2 mile of public transit, and that includes bus stops. And so when you lay out bus stops and transit facilities, etc., you'll, in most cases, in many communities, find that in many cases you're not going to be able to require additional parking for the ADUs. Moreover, for an ADU that's internal, if it's internal within the primary structure or a structure on the property, you cannot require additional parking. So if the unit is internal in the primary structure or another structure, or if the ADU is within 1/2 mile of public transit, as I've described, no additional parking can be required. The question here really is more having to do with where parking is required. You're not within 1/2 mile of a public transit facility. Is that an area where Clayton would want to be even more flexible, more lenient in terms of the parking requirement? And that's what's stated right here. Should the parking requirements be further reduced beyond the requirement of the state law or even eliminated altogether for an ADU? And the next policy question has to do with owner occupancy. Again, the CMC, our baseline, required that the owner would need to reside in either the primary structure or the second dwelling unit, or could be on the same side of the street and sharing a common lot line, a neighbor to the primary dwelling unit. State law allows for owner occupancy requirements and allows for rental terms to be dictated by local jurisdictions. This is important. In terms of owner occupancy, you could match the CMC. You could go another direction and say that owner occupancy is not required for either the primary or secondary. You could do that. So that there's a lot of discretion there. And then what a lot of communities are finding is that in terms of short-term rentals are taking away from affordable housing stock. And so this whole idea of short-term rentals, is that something you want to control in terms of the secondary dwelling unit, the ADU, better said, should be rented for a period in excess of 30 days or some time frame. So that's important to look at. And that's described here on this slide. Policy question 8, the CMC did not contain an appeal process. Would the City of Clayton want to include an appeal process in its ordinance? And the appeal process, again, the idea is that this would be ministerial, staff level, but if there's a dispute, could that be appealed, and would it be appealed to the Planning Commission? What would the appeal procedure be? Should there be an appeal process, and what does that look like? Policy question 9. The state also talks about junior accessory dwelling units, and I mentioned that in the introduction. And a junior accessory dwelling unit is limited in size up to 500 square feet, and these are typically bedrooms within a home. And it would be set up typically with a separate entry point from the outside in. There could be, as indicated here on this slide, internal access, but typically going from the junior accessory dwelling unit to other portions of the house may be locked, could be locked. There could be, in a case like this, there would typically be a sink, but there could be shared bathroom or sanitation facilities. This is another way to take advantage of existing housing stock. You may have, let's say, empty nesters, a larger home, not many people in that home, the opportunity to maybe create a situation where one or more people could be using some of those extra bedrooms as a junior accessory dwelling unit. Is this something you want to include in the ordinance? And again, this issue comes forward again here on this slide in terms of short-term rentals. That's important for you to be thinking about as we move forward with this ordinance. And that's the overview for you tonight in terms of the issues we've brought to you. And I'm sure that as the City of Clayton moves forward with developing an accessory dwelling unit ordinance, there will be more questions and more topics. But this is a start, and that's the overview for you. So I take your direction, Mayor Catalano, at this point.
Great, thank you. So let's just see if there's any overall clarification questions anybody needs to ask before we go for public comment.
I just have one quick one. The last one here, this junior ADU.
Yes.
Could that replace any part of the ADU? If we were to do one inside and one outside, for instance, would the junior one qualify for the inside?
I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the ADU, as indicated in my introduction, the junior ADU is really similar to the repurposed internal. A difference would be that in terms of size and also in terms of process, the state has particular and different requirements, somewhat different requirements for the junior ADU, but it's similar in many ways to the repurposed internal dwelling unit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other clarifications? Councilmember Juan?
For item number 7, you mentioned short-term rentals. Do we currently have restrictions over short-term rentals in any fashion? No.
Never.
Waiting for this. There it is. One clarifying question back. Are you referring to like Airbnbs or?
Yeah, that would be a short-term rental,
right,
or any other short-term rental.
No, the city, that proposition was provided to the council, a while back, 18 months ago, and the city council decided not to regulate those short-term rentals at this time in the residential zones, waiting to see if they became a problem.
Okay. On item number 8, appeals, what happened previously when a decision was made by the development director that the owner disagreed with? If we had no system for appeal, were they just out of luck?
Let me provide a response to that, and I'm sure the city manager will expand on it. But as I look at the record here in Clayton, there have been very, very few second dwelling units approved. And so in terms of the volume, it's been a very, very low volume. And with the action of the state and then the local ordinance that may follow, or even if the local ordinance doesn't follow, given the state requirements, it's very likely that applications for ADUs and construction of ADUs will increase. And then with the various provisions that we've been discussing tonight that could then drop into an ordinance, or even looking at the state regulations, no doubt there will be some discussion between property owner and the staff at some point. And it would be helpful, I think, to have a clear appeal process spelled out in the ordinance. In terms of any specific disputes, the city manager may be aware of some. I'm not.
Nothing has come to my level of anyone who has applied for an ADU and then felt that either a denial for whatever reason, they felt that their rights weren't heard. If it were to have come to my level that someone was not satisfied with the director's decision, I would have, even though it was silent in the municipal code, I would have requested the director to take it to the planning commission to give a citizen response to. So, but in that absence, I have not heard of anyone who's applied for an ADU that was unsatisfied with the response.
My last question. In the agenda packet, there is a discussion about connection fees under other issues. I don't think that you had talked about that. Is that something that you could discuss or expand on? I guess my overall question is, I know in the past there was a fairly substantial fee for connections of various utilities, and the way I read this now, it somewhat describes that these types of fees for within dwelling units are not permissible, and then outside of dwelling units are limited by some factor. But I'm not clear on what that is. I think that in the neighborhood of like 20 grand is what it would cost just for utility hookups. But based on the new rules, that's somewhat limited. But can you give an example of what that would be?
I can give you more information on that, Councilmember Juan, and I think we'd probably have to look at this in a more detailed manner to give you a figure or dollar sums. But in general, you talked about some of the provisions already, but in general, state provisions indicate that there cannot be additional connection fees for an internal ADU. And so that's important in terms of keeping costs down. Backing up, one of the real impediments, I would say, based on my experience with a number of jurisdictions to putting ADUs in place, had to do with the connection fees. The connection fees, as you're alluding to, are typically or have been very high and an impediment. The state regulations are very, very clear about no fees in terms of an internal ADU, and then it talks about proportionality in terms of a detached ADU, so that whether it's the water district or the city of Clayton or some other provider of a utility, they will need to come up with a rate that is proportionate and not cumbersome in terms of a detached ADU. So that's an area that we can provide more information to council and commission in the future. But the intent of the state regulations is really to reduce the impact, the impediment of connection fees in terms of being able to place ADUs. I hope that gives you enough information for now.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if you're able to follow up at another time, that'd be great. I guess what I'm interested in is just somewhat of a ballpark of the magnitude of the fees on a, let's say, a typical unit that you can make whatever assumptions you need to make. Like in the agenda packet, it talks, it describes the previous fees, and they're in the $20,000 range. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious as to what those fees would look like in a typical detached setting. And if they haven't provided that type of guidance because they need to come up with those fees, then that's an answer too. I am interested.
If I might, and I know that you're aware, but some cities provide their own water services. In the city of Clayton, we do not. It's by a separate special district, the Contra Costa Water District. So we have no control, therefore, over what that special district charges for its water connections. And as Mr. Woltering indicated, that has been an impediment, an impediment in future or past ADUs. People, when they're interested, they find out the connections are severe. Similarly with electrical, we do not provide that as well. We do, however, charge a fee for sewer connections. And the application of that, we would need to discuss that with the City of Concord, who actually, by contract, is responsible for the operation and maintenance and the fees for people making connections to the municipal system.
Okay.
But we can provide a typical example.
Yeah, that'd be great. I forgot I had one other question. I know that some developments provide for a maximum square footage per property for the main or for the residents. Would an ADU square footage count towards that aggregate maximum?
It could. And so one of the questions posed earlier had to do with development standards. And we're really not prepared to talk about that in detail tonight, but I think as council may come back and say, we are interested in you looking at a schedule, staff developing a schedule in terms of things like lot size, setbacks, lot coverage, which you're talking about, Councilmember Juan. We could do that to give kind of a sense of what's out there as far as lot sizes, what the current regulations are in terms of development standards, and what that might mean in terms of placing an ADU of 800 square feet or what have you, as an example, a sample on the property. Again, kind of going back to the direction from the state, the idea is, yes, you have some discretion in those areas, but you're not to put undue, unreasonable encumbrances in the way of achieving more ADUs in your community. If I could give a little bit more information in terms of this community and kind of looking at the APR, the annual progress report, in terms of your housing element implementation, it's important to know that HCD does count ADUs toward your RENA numbers. So that's important to know. And looking at the current APR for Clayton, total RENA number for this period 2015 through 2023 is 141, your total number of units, your goal, your objective. The community has 51 in the very low category and 25 in the low category, and you have none to date in either one of those categories. Theoretically, ADUs could be an opportunity to maybe at least see some units in the low category. I know where I've worked before, we did do that. And so it could be helpful in terms of your RENA numbers as you work with HCD going forward.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Pierce, you had a hand up. No? Any questions, comments? No? I have just two questions myself. Can you do an ADU in a new construction project, or can you only do it in a property that already has an existing unit?
You can do an ADU in a new project or existing.
Okay. And then if you do build ADUs in a new construction project that has more than 10 units, meaning you're then subject to our inclusionary housing requirements, can those ADUs satisfy your BMR, below market rate requirements?
That's a good question, and I might need to research that a little bit further. In terms of density, the ADUs do not count toward density. So that's something to kind of keep in mind.
Okay.
So I'm going to need to research that further, because if on the one hand they're not being counted toward density, and if on the other hand you're being able to use them toward your inclusionary requirement, I need to look at that.
Yeah,
that's something to
fine.
research.
Yeah. Okay. Then let's open up for public comment. I don't have any speaker cards, but if anyone would like to address the council, please come up.
Yeah, that's true.
Go ahead. Please state your name just for the record. Although
Chris.
But they could be.
Can I ask a question?
you can provide your comments, and we can certainly pick it up later. So just
okay,
go ahead.
so my comments is that for me, I can't really tell just based on some of the conversation that's happening is if the city is trying to be more pro ADU units, or if it's almost trying to set up guidelines and more restrictions to make it more difficult to do ADU units. So for me, as a builder, it's already extremely difficult to build anything in the state of California. And like standard cost right now, it's almost like $500 or $600 a square foot. So not a lot of people are able to build in general. And so just from the conversation that's been going on, I can't really tell if we're trying to make it simpler or more difficult. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would just want to bring up is that restricting possible sizes for the way that I start thinking about things is, to me, it's great to have more housing, especially talking with seniors and making things more available on the market. And it's extremely hard to build a structure that accounts for people who have accessibility disabilities. And so putting maybe more intense restrictions on square footage and sizes on these ADU units can potentially make it more difficult for somebody to build a structure who wants to have housing for their grandma or future mother down the road, or somebody who does have disabilities. So I think it's an extremely complex issue you guys are discussing, and it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of work around it. And so those are kind of the things that I was thinking sitting here, and hopefully you guys can address and think about. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. And seeing no one else come to the podium, we'll close public comment, and kind of in response to your question, I think you'll find out in the next few minutes where all of the 5 council members stand in terms of how restrictive or not on ADUs we want to be. So I think with that, I think we'll want to go through these sort of one item at a time, but maybe generally, are there any comments, or are we generally all 5 of us in agreement that we want to provide for local regulations, understanding that if we don't do anything, then it is the state regulation that guides?
I forgot one thing.
Go ahead.
This was outlined 9 policy questions. Is this the population of areas that the city has discretion, or are there other potential areas, or is this just what's being presented now? I know that the law is quite complex, so I don't want to say that these are the only areas that we have the ability to act in. I don't know if that's true or not.
I think we can certainly, as we discuss, maybe towards the end, if there's other areas of regulation we'd want to address, then maybe let's bring them up and discuss with staff and see if those are some things we can or can't do. Go ahead, Vice Mayor Peters.
I would just comment that there are over 200 bills in Sacramento right now dealing with housing. Mm-hmm. I think this encompasses most of the things that the state has already adopted, but there's more on the horizon. So, yes, I think this addresses most of the issues at this point, but we don't know where we're going yet for all of it. But I, for one, definitely want to put in place our own rules so that we are not beholden to the state standards. In some cases, I would like them to be more liberal. In others, I think maybe I just want more definition. But I'm 100% in favor of putting together our own ADU ordinance.
Okay, so let's just then pick it up and go one at a time. And maybe you can bring up, yeah, perfect, it's over there. So let's start with issue number 1, which is the definition of an ADU. So I think that the question here is, I think there's an efficiency unit definition under the California Building Code, which is at least 220 square feet with certain amenities. There's another definition of manufactured home. So the policy question for us is, do we want size to be lower than 220? I think we could go down to 150 square feet, and what kind of facilities we want to have there. So where are we on this? Let's just go kind of one by one.
I'll jump in. when we had this on our agenda a month ago, I made extensive notes and then we didn't get to it. So I had to dig through my pile of paper and found my notes. So that's good. I am 100% in favor of making it as small as 150 square feet. I think it's going to depend on the individual unit. That would almost certainly be a large bedroom in someone's home that could be adapted. That given, I'm not sure that it definitely needs to have a kitchen sink. It might have less than a full kitchen, full cooking facilities. But still could qualify. I guess maybe it's a junior ADU technically, but it's which category it falls in is something I'll leave to the experts to kind of figure out how we do that. But I think we want to be as least restrictive as we can be to allow for all possibilities. It may be that I want to be able to have grandma in the house. She has no need to cook, but she needs a certain amount of independence or something like that and access to the outdoors. Don't know what the mobility issues are going to be, but 150 square feet may be plenty of room. And I don't want to be precluded from being able to do that. And it may be that the grandson, while he's going to junior college, needs a room, and he's going to be renting that from grandma to help pay for the taxes and everything else. But he's almost certainly not going to be cooking regular meals and cleaning up after himself. So, I think we need to relax this as much as we can to allow for all possibilities.
Okay, other thoughts on the size?
So are you saying 150 square feet is the max, or is that
minimum?
That's the minimum. Okay, I didn't get that. So you would go up to 220 square feet, or
Well, no, this is only talking about the minimums.
just talking about the minimum?
Yeah, so current state is minimum is 220. If we want to go lower, it allows for more units. The minimum would be lower. I guess I question whether this is essentially a room within a unit. If it's a student or a parent, what advantage does it have to designate it as an ADU rather than typically renting a room? I mean, I'm not sure what benefit is conferred by designating it as an ADU. I mean, we get a increased RENA number, so that's good. But other than that, if I want my parents to live in my house, I'm not going to set up an ADU. They're just going to move into the room.
But it may be somebody else as well.
Yeah, so I guess my point is that it's not. The examples about a student, a grandchild or a parent, I don't think that really holds, because that won't happen. It'll almost certainly be someone other than a family member. Otherwise, you would just rent the room.
So I'll tell you that the only ADU that I recall that we had approved, which was in the last 2 years, 3 years, was absolutely that scenario where it was generational change, where it was I think it was a widowed, elderly, retired person who was living in a large single-family home, realized it was too much of a home for her. However, she had I think it was a daughter and a daughter's husband, and I think they had a couple kids who needed a place to live, more affordable. So what they did is they built a second unit on the property. She, the elderly woman, moved into that second unit, and the daughter, husband, and the kids moved in the primary residence. And that allowed. So I think it absolutely can be a multi-generational arrangement, and I think that's probably the more likely scenario that we would have them in.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I guess I'm talking specifically about the 150 square foot number. To me, I think that would be surprising if it were a multi-generational situation in a 150 square foot unit that would designate as an ADU, unless there's some benefit that I don't know about. I don't know what they get by designating it that way.
So are you in favor of a larger size? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm questioning does anyone know what benefit someone gets from doing that?
Could be tax benefits I get. I'm not an expert in that. Mr. Waltering?
Yes, through the mayor, I think it's already been stated there would be the opportunity to get a RENA credit One, and I think
Well, that helps us, but
Yes.
they don't care about that.
Well, it helps the city, but it also sets up a situation where there are different size homes in any community. And it may be a smaller home, let's say, and within that smaller home, the primary resident, the property owner, wants to hold on to a certain amount of space for that purpose, that person's use and purposes. But they may have a small area that they could set up as an efficiency and rent that out. And in that case, a smaller home, let's say where the property owner is trying to maintain control of the majority of the area, and they have an area that's, small, but they could set it up, they could rent it, and it could meet the city's definition, and the city would get arena credits. So the property owner gets a rental income, and the city gets arena credits. So that could be a scenario.
Mr. Napper?
Yes, I just wanted to add that the example given and the discussion is centered on, I think, and let's say we call it for definition purposes an eternal unit, an internal. Internal. The question posed is maybe 150 square feet is sufficient for an internal unit, but did you want to make that universal for external units as well? At 150 square feet, just chatting with the attorney, you could make a distinction between minimum footage between an internal unit and an external unit. So just for your consideration.
Okay, Councilmember Wolf?
And what about the casitas and the rooms that are already existing? Are we getting arena credit for that? No.
If they're not
and
legal.
would that then change anything, or would those continue to be just casitas and units where somebody else is living? I've been to model homes and things where they have the attached second entrance with the little kitchenette and all of that. And would those then be considered ADUs, or would they just consider them casitas?
Through the mayor again, the property owner would need to come through the city and get the necessary permits to have that permitted as an ADU. So, for example, if currently, let's say it's perhaps an accessory structure that has been used for other purposes, but they would want to come in and have it approved for an ADU, they would need to go through our process, whether it's the state regulations or the local ordinance that may be in effect at the time, and building code requirements to make sure it's a safe structure. So to respond to your question, the casita that's out there today that's not with the benefit of, say, a building permit or an ADU permit is not an ADU. But the whole objective here with the state standards is to provide reasonable standards to really facilitate people coming in and maybe converting the casita to a legal ADU in a cost-effective manner. And so it becomes an ADU, the city gets arena credit, it goes through a building permit process, it's deemed a safe structure, et cetera, hopefully at an expedited review, 120 days for the permitting process, and the costs would be lower. So we're trying to get more safe housing.
Okay. Any other comments? So where are we on the size? Go ahead.
Well, I would just offer, I think even if it's an external unit, 12 by 12, 10 by 15, for example, in somebody's backyard could very easily be an efficiency unit. I mean, you put a sink and a microwave and a refrigerator and maybe a hot plate on it, and it could be an efficiency unit. I mean, I've had hotel rooms with all of those things in them that are about that size, and you can pretty well live in them for quite a while.
There are whole television shows on tiny houses.
Yeah, there are that are smaller than that. So and even in a neighborhood like Westwood that has approximately 5,000 square foot lots, the house that I had there was plenty of room in the backyard to have put a unit that size in it and still meeting all the standard setbacks, not even with going to reduce setbacks. So It could have been a pool house, it could have been any number of things, but it would certainly work as an efficiency or a studio apartment as well. So I don't see a need to go to something larger. I think people are going to think about what's going to fit their circumstance and their particular property. And I don't want them to say we have to have 250 or 220 square feet, and they can't do it if they really want to be able to. I want to be permissive on this. That's where I'm coming from.
So I think for me, I'm happy with the 150 square feet size, and I think that's certainly, for if it's internal, I wouldn't want to be any larger. And I have an exterior standalone structure in my property, which is a finished sauna structure, all legal, all permitted. But it's 300 square feet, and if that were an ADU, I could certainly see that it could also be smaller. So I don't know that I want to go any smaller than, to increase the size. So I'm fine with 150, whether it's interior or exterior. Any other thoughts? So we can move on.
I think I'm probably fine with the smaller size. Although it does interact with some of the other items that we're going to talk about on the number of units and placement of the units. But if we hold those other things independent, then the overall size is not a huge deal. I think it would be very difficult to pencil out a separate unit at 150 square feet, but if someone wants to do it, that's fine. But the part about partial bath and or kitchen, what does that mean? Like, are we talking a hot plate and like no shower, or like an outhouse, or I don't know what we're talking about?
Through the mayor, if I could.
Go ahead.
I think in terms of the bathroom facility could be shared. It could be a shared facility within the dwelling unit, let's say. If it's an internal ADU, it could be that circumstance. There could also be, as already mentioned, I think, by council members, there could be a sink, there could be a microwave, something like that. In terms of a kitchen facility, again, it could be shared as well. So there are the opportunities for something small and efficient within the space, or the opportunity for shared. And again, I think what we can do is to come back, Councilmember Juan, with more information on the amenities at a future date. There seems to be, a desire for more information in that area, and we can certainly look at it in terms of sharing, or what would it look like if it's within the unit. I gave you some ideas,
Yeah.
but
I'm, where I'm at, I'm not very concerned with units internal units.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to share however they want, that's fine. I'm more interested in what it would look like on an external unit. And so I would say 150 square feet is fine, but if it's an external unit, you mentioned that we could bifurcate those things, then I wouldn't want to have the partials on the external units, but the internal units doesn't, anything goes as far as I see.
okay.
That would be just a practical decision, so that it could be independent if it was outside the main unit. That makes total sense. I wanted to add one more thing to this one, and David, you can tell me if this is where you want it brought up or not. It occurs to me that, and I know this was on Mindy's long list of things to get to, but is this where we ought to take a look at our floor area ratios on our lots? Because
that's in developments too.
This may actually be where we need to look at lot coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, we're pretty restrictive on our lot coverages, particularly some of our larger lots that may be too restrictive. There may really be more room there than we have allowed for in the past. And I don't remember exactly when we put those in place, but it's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was before you were here before, so it goes back a ways. But I think this is a good opener to start thinking about that as a policy construct for how much lot coverage is okay. And we've pretty much limited the amount of accessory structures allowed in the past and been pretty strict about it. And we may want to revisit that. So I think, personally, I think that's where this one comes up. And that sort of goes to setbacks as well, which I know is the next, one of the next items. But yeah, I think we need to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I know at least a few people who would have put in an ADU, but they ran into maximum lot size
Right.
coverage and they said
Exactly.
no.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm within 5 feet right now, 5 square feet
You got to move.
of max.
So I think we're at 150. I think the question about looking at the lot coverage before we come back, and in terms of, for me, the bathroom versus kitchen facilities, if it's an external unit, I certainly think makes sense to have separate bathroom facilities. On the kitchen, I still think that even on on an external unit, you could have a partial kitchen, so that you don't have to have a full kitchen.
What's a
But
partial kitchen?
it can be as simple as a microwave, refrigerator areas, and a hot plate type thing, as opposed to
You wouldn't have to
full-blown
have a
with
full
oven.
stove and oven.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a tiny unit, and it could be for a student or something like that, it's not, I don't think it's
Some of the
necessary to have
hot
a full
plates are
blown.
really nice. They're induction cooktops
I-
that are like that big.
Yeah.
I don't know
A
if
lot
that's
of the
the type of-
casitas have those now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would be hesitant on the partials on the external units, but
So
I don't think
would
we
you
need to
require
decide that now.
a full kitchen?
A regular, I mean, it's basically you're creating a new habitable housing unit, and I would think that it would have all those same requirements as a housing unit. It's just small.
Okay.
Any other points? Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is location. So I think the policy questions for us here are, should there be a minimum lot size if you have a new standalone ADU? Should we allow more than one ADU per unit? Thoughts on that? Direction on that?
One in and one out is my vote.
I would think for single family zoning, you would have the maximum of the one external. It seems consistent with the zoning.
Okay. How about on this side?
I like the external as well. I think that we should take a look at the junior ADUs, though, for the inside.
But doesn't the junior ADU,
This
is
kind
it-
of-
I mean, the designation of the junior, it seems to me not to be about size, but in terms of review and approval, because we're already talking about size. You don't have to call it junior if you don't want to, but the junior is just providing a different avenue of approval. It streamlines the amount of review, it changes the amount of time, and it limits the amount of discretion. I mean, that's what you're talking about with junior. It's purely about
is
the
that a bad
path,
thing?
not size.
But is that a bad thing to streamline that process?
Well, no, just to be clear, it's not talking about size in any way. You could call anything up to 500, I guess, a junior.
Except that doesn't the junior have requirements with regard to kitchen and
Well, it reduces it, essentially. It reduces the requirement.
bathroom?
It doesn't have to, though.
Yeah, you don't
I
have
think
to.
it's just
So-
providing for what is, what the maximum numbers are.
So on the ADU itself, more than one per lot? Or are we good with one per lot?
I would say one per lot.
Per lot?
I would also say one per lot, but again, as far as the
We'll come back to the junior
yeah.
units at the end, because I think that was a policy item. Yes?
You know, I initially said one per lot, but I'm thinking of several properties in town that are acre-sized properties. And it comes up later on, in separation and in space between the main unit and the second one on an acre lot. You could easily have a unit 100 feet away from the main house, as I know of on a couple of my neighbors' properties that are that big. And there's still room to add, there's a half acre that doesn't have anything on it except a patch of oxalis. And so I could see where that might be specific to a minimum lot size, to have more than one.
So I mean,
without requiring a lot split, where the owner could afford to stay on the property.
But if you're talking multiple units on, let's say, a residence that's a single-family zoning, then you're effectively making it multifamily zoning? That's misspeaking. You're not changing the zoning, but you are allowing multifamily to reside on that property. If for example, the example that you gave, you have one ADU on one side of the acre lot, you have another on the other side of the acre lot, and then you have the main residence. You're essentially being able to support 3 families on what was previously zoned as single family. That's what we're talking about, right?
And maybe you restrict it to families, so you have multi-generational family on one property. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming here.
And is that really what we're doing, though? Is brainstorming this? We're not creating policy. We're just brainstorming.
We're giving direction
to staff.
Providing direction to come back later.
Come back. So for me, I'm fine with having one ADU per lot. I'm open to thinking about if you had some extremely large lots, what that would look like. I would not want to impose any minimum lot size because I think it gets governed by setbacks more than the lot size.
Just as a point, wouldn't that second possible ADU be part of the appeals process?
Well, we'll come back to that.
But wouldn't that be a possibility?
Sure, yeah, depending on what we decide on the appeals.
So a restriction on minimum lot size, what would that look like? It would say something like, if you have a lot less than X square feet, then you cannot.
Right.
Something like that? Yeah, I don't care about that.
I think you can regulate that with the setbacks. That's what we're looking at. Okay, so I think we're generally no lot size, no minimum. Go ahead.
A question of clarification. When you say 1 ADU per lot, are you saying 1 external ADU? I mean, what about internal? Because there's the opportunity for an internal ADU and there's the opportunity for an external ADU.
I'm okay with both.
I'm saying 1 either or, not both. That's what I'm saying.
I agree with Jeff. I'm sorry, with Council Member Juan. 1 on the outside. On the inside, it becomes a sticky wicket for me with regard to what is an ADU, like you brought up earlier, and what is a room that grandma's renting. I mean, going through a process now, and we talked about the casitas that exist already. Grandma's probably already in there. And we get nothing for that, and they get nothing for that, except grandma's living there.
Because if you have 1 in and 1 out, and then plus the main residence, you have 3 living units on the property on a single family zoning. I think that's too much.
So I don't know that I care. I'd like 1 external, and like I said, I'd be happy to look at if it's a really large lot, what that would look like having multiple. But I think generally speaking, 1 per lot. I'm kind of indifferent about internal units, whether you could have also another unit internal.
Again, clarification. So let's say somebody would come in and obtain approval for an internal ADU. Then you're saying that they could not come back and request approval for an external ADU.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
Well, let's just take a straw vote on that.
Well, I would say, look at the house that's there now. If it's already on the property, maybe it's already raised a family, and a couple of those rooms are empty and want to be turned into an ADU, which is getting it closer to what it used to house when it was full with a family. And then some, they make that a separate unit, an ADU. Is there a reason that they can't use the old pool house that nobody's using as a second ADU outside? Why is that a problem if the property used to support a certain number of people because of the size that it was, why can it not go back and support that number of people again? I mean, that's part of the problem we have in a lot of our neighborhoods, is that we've got seniors in big houses that because of Prop 13 can't afford to move out. And they're underutilized spaces that could go back into real use instead of sitting as dusty, empty bedrooms. Maybe the dusty doesn't happen, but empty bedrooms.
So in order to provide direction to staff, let's just take a quick straw vote in terms of are we okay with having one internal and one external or not?
I would say you pick one or the other.
So you're saying one per lot and you're okay?
One in, one out.
One in and out.
I'll go with the one.
One overall. And Jim? Jim?
I'm fine.
I'm
fine with it.
Are you in favor of having a total limit of one ADU?
Fine with it. I'm fine with it.
Okay, so I'm fine with having one external and one internal, so I think we're 2 to 2.
That's what I said. I'm
Okay.
fine with it.
With that?
Okay.
Okay. So I think,
Okay.
yeah, and obviously this will come back as an ordinance anyway, and we'll have a chance to take a
And the
closer look
planning
at it.
commission will have added in between.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next item, which is setbacks. So in this one, it's a question of how much and what kind of setbacks we want to provide for ADU units. Should they be the same as we have for the principal residence? Should be the same as we have for accessory structures? What's the overall thoughts on setbacks?
There's somewhat of a complication that Mr. Woltering identified in the accessory structure versus ADU inconsistency, but I think overall I would say that we should be as consistent as possible throughout and not have a difference overall between accessory structures, ADUs, and it talks about that later between 15 and 16 foot heights. So I think that's that's confusing for no reason. So I would endeavor to be as consistent as possible throughout. And then notwithstanding the limit on this garage type conversion, I would make the setbacks consistent with the current setbacks on all the buildings around the property already. So if there's a setback of 5 internal sidelines or 10 feet on the back, then that should also apply to any of the ADUs, at least for the external ones, and the internal ones already apply. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely go with the accessory structure setbacks that we already have, with the exception that I do think, as state law suggests, we could go 5 for back and side. We've got a 12 foot from the main building. I think that's probably a good one. The 65 feet from the front property line is outrageous. There are a lot of properties that aren't 65 feet deep, but they may be wide. And so I don't think you can do that kind of a blanket setback for an accessory structure that would be an ADU. I think that's something we have to really look at. And so maybe maybe some property has a big side yard and it could be the same as the main structure back from the front property line. I don't think, we were trying to keep sheds from being out front and visible, but this is different from that. So I think we need to look at reducing that setback from the front property line. And I'm not going to say what the number is because I don't know. That needs more looking at. But I think going to the 5 back and side and 12 feet from the main makes sense.
Okay, so for me, the one item I circled here was the 65-foot front setback, and I thought too that there are a lot of structures in our city that existing dwelling units that are closer than 65 feet to the property line, and I'd want that to be less. I don't know what the figure is either, but Councilmember Wolf.
I agree with what you've said here, and so we're covered legally with regard to the ADU that's constructed from a garage conversion, and I think that's fine then.
How is a structure built closer than 65 feet if there's already an existing 65-foot setback?
No, think
It's
about,
not for the main structure, it's for accessory structures.
yeah.
To put them out
Yeah.
of sight behind a house.
Think about a lot of properties
yeah.
that have just literally a one-car
Sure.
garage, and they're 25 feet from the property line.
Yeah, so I guess I would say I would want the setbacks to be consistent with the primary residence. So if the primary residence is closer, then that's fine. Although I don't like the idea of a 5-foot from the side yards. If like all your neighbors put up structures 5 foot from your side, that'd be like a pain in the ass. But if the existing setback is already 5 feet, then that's fine. But so whatever the primary residence setback is, I would be consistent with that.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
But again, just a point of clarification on that point with regard to the garage conversion, wouldn't that, if we change that to more than 5 feet, wouldn't that change our legal requirement for the?
Well, we don't get to change the garage. Apparently, the garage stuff has been precluded.
You can just do the conversion.
Yeah,
and
we don't have a choice on the garages.
This would be for a standalone structure or in addition to an existing structure.
Then fine.
I think the issue is, though, when you get into a backyard, you're
Right.
not looking at it from the front. We've already said accessory structures can be shallower setbacks. I think we need to be consistent with that. Yeah. Front setback, same as the main structure, but the rest of them, the same as accessory structures.
Okay. Mr. Waltering?
Clarification, because I think Vice Mayor Pierce and Councilmember Wan, I think you may be saying something different.
We are.
Okay. And so.
I'm okay with 5 back and side, and front the same as the main structure.
Okay.
Only the latter, not the former.
Okay.
I'm fine with what Julie said.
Yeah, me too.
Because essentially, if you allow the 5 on the sides, whereas otherwise the primary residence wasn't 5, you're encroaching on the given setback of the property, right? I mean, that's what we're saying, that you could build another building up to whatever height this is, if we go with 15 or 16, or 2 stories even, if we go with that, then you're going to allow that to be 5 foot from a fence line on the internal side fences.
But we allow accessory structures already to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's slightly different. An accessory structure isn't really somewhere that someone's living in, so they don't have a window looking out into your yard, versus here, you have 15 feet, the standard fence height's 6 feet. So you're effectively saying that your neighbor could build a 15 or 16 or 2-story structure 5 feet from your fence with a window into your yard.
Not necessarily, because I think there's building code requirements that kick in about how close you can have property line openings, right?
There are provisions in the building code, and generally speaking, in terms of the building code, the setback needs, when you have openings on a property line, needs to be at least 3 feet. The zoning or planning code is greater, typically 5 feet, but the building code allows up to 3 feet.
Okay,
But you're focusing on planning provisions, and so if the planning provision, let's say the ADU provision, to be more clear, is 5 feet, that would be the guide.
You
So
know,
that's what I'm opposed
the
to.
other thing is, we had an instance where we looked at this at the houses on Southbrook, and the existing neighbors were concerned that the elevation of these houses and where the windows would be would destroy their privacy. And what we did was require clerestory windows for light, where they wouldn't be routinely looking out those windows into the neighbor's yard. So the ones abutting the property line, close to the property line, were restricted in height when the project was appealed from the Planning Commission to the City Council. And we made that restriction. And instead of that great big window that they had in the original plans, we made a row of clerestory windows. That could be part of a design guideline, which we are allowed to keep. And so maybe we put in an exception for adjacent to a property line. If it's 5 foot, you can only have windows over 6 feet off the floor adjacent to that property line. So you protect the privacy of the neighbor. That could be a design standard that we require, and require the external entrance to be on the interior of the lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Through the mayor, yes. Again, this is to be a ministerial process, no discretionary review.
Right.
But if you had that as a standard, a requirement, a design standard in the ordinance, you could do it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that that's attempting to mitigate it. I just, a 15-foot or 16-foot structure, 5 feet from, 5 feet is less than my wingspan. I mean, this is less than, 5 feet is less than this.
5 feet is my wingspan.
Yeah. And a structure that's that tall, adjacent, like, not literally, but basically right up to the fence is, I don't think that makes for good neighbors.
My neighbor's garden shed is right there, and they use it as an artist studio with windows looking over my fence.
Do you enjoy that?
Not particularly, but that's what trees are for.
Granted, I think that there's ways to mitigate, but ultimately you still have the underlying thing. And so that's, like I said, I would be opposed to decreasing the setback on that's less than what is established for the primary residence. I think the primary residence should govern the setbacks.
So I would think that from a practical perspective, if you're building a permanent ADU, I don't think you'd necessarily want to have windows facing a fence. But maybe if somebody does, we're going to discuss the appeal process in a moment. So if we allow appeal process, then the type of appropriateness of the windows on the property line could be handled that way too, if it becomes an issue.
And we can let the planning commission hash it out before it comes back to us.
So I think collectively, we were fine with 5 feet, and like I said, it will come back to us anyway. So let's move on to our next item, which is the unit size. So this is whether or not we want to regulate the maximum size, and there are some limitations already from state law. So the question is, what should be the maximum size? Should we increase it beyond the 1,200 square foot as mandated by state law? Is there a difference between attached and detached ADU maximum size? Thoughts on that?
This says that 1,200 is the max.
Yes, I think state law has 1,200. So I don't think we can go below that, right?
Actually,
you can go below, but not above.
You could go below, and there's some uncertainty about the 1,200 square feet being a maximum. So I don't think that that's a firm standard in the state law. There's been some discussion that a local agency could go to a larger size. But if you apply the state regulations, the maximum size is 1,200 square feet. So I think you have the authority in your local ordinance to go above 1,200 square feet or go below. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, what we're finding is that other jurisdictions are kind of looking at 800 to 1,200 square feet as a reasonable range, and it seems that that's been accepted by HCD, Housing and Community Development at the state level.
This may be something that has to do with the size of the lot overall. I'm not sure that going over 1,200 square feet in Clayton makes any sense.
I'd go with an internal or attached, not to exceed 50% of the existing primary dwelling living area, and make a max of 1,200 square feet for detached. I don't think it really matters for inside. If it's no more than 50, if you have a 3,500 square foot home and you want to split it in half, okay. As far as living area, how you divide that up, it's not that big a deal as long as you don't go over 50% for the accessory unit. But for the detached, I would say no more than 1,200.
Okay, other comments?
Hold on a second, I need to think about math.
Again, I still find the internal part a bit much of a sticky wicket for me. I can see the outside building clear as a bell, but the inside part, that becomes very muddled for me as to regulating sizes and what's an ADU inside. But again, I'm in favor of the 1,200 square foot maximum for the outside.
I'm the same on the detached. 1,200 is fine for maximum.
Yeah, I'm fine with that on the outside. On the inside, I don't think I care.
Yeah. So I think we're fine then with the 50% of that. Okay, height is our next item, number 5. Should the height requirements be higher than 1 story or 15 feet for detached ADUs? Should we match the ADU max height on the detached ones to 16 feet, which is what our accessory buildings provide?
I'm thinking 6 feet.
6 feet?
That's it. 1 story, 6 feet. You'll have to crouch, but other than that.
Hobbits only.
I'd say the 16 feet, 1 story max for the detached.
Because that's where we are now with 16
Yeah,
feet.
if the existing house is 2-story, then I'd be okay with a 2-story attached. But I'd prefer that it stay single-story for a detached. And 16 feet to just make it internally consistent.
I prefer the standalone structures to be no more than 16 feet or 1 story as well.
I agree.
Any other thoughts?
An attached 2-story.
Well, only if the existing house is 2 stories.
Well, that's just essentially an addition.
Yeah,
Right.
But it's a separate unit.
like over a garage or something. If the garage is 1 story and the rest of the house is 2 stories. That's the only way I'd be willing to go 2 stories, is if there's existing 2-story structure somehow in the existing house.
Do the setbacks change when you have 2-story at all? They don't, right?
Mm-mm.
'Cause I thought I read somewhere if it was like a second build above a garage, then the setback is different. I don't know if I remember that correctly.
Through the mayor,
Go ahead.
you're correct in terms of...
Did I read that right?
You did read that right.
Nice.
But that's in terms of the state standards.
Okay.
Remember, it was for a garage conversion. So a garage conversion, if the setback is less than 5 feet existing, you could convert that garage without modifying the setback. But then as you add a second story, let's say, to that converted garage, I think that's what you read.
Yes.
Then that needs to be set back
Right.
5 feet.
An additional 5 feet.
Yes. Well, set back 5 feet from the property line.
Okay.
So it can go straight up at 5 feet setback for a garage.
With the second story over the garage? All right. Yeah, I'm fine with the 16 foot on the detached.
Or 1 story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, wait, 16 foot or 1 story?
No more
1
than.
story max
Yeah.
at 16 feet.
So you're not
max.
doing 2 8
Okay.
foot or building it
Yeah.
Yeah.
below or something.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Next item is parking, and the question is, should we reduce or eliminate the state law requirements on parking for ADUs?
No.
That's a tough one.
No.
So I think the state law requires, if I'm correct, that it requires
No
no
more.
more than 1 parking space per unit or per bedroom, whichever is less.
So the most you could ever require is 1, essentially.
right, yeah.
And I think that's what we should do.
And that's off-street. can be tandem, can be anywhere in the driveway.
And it takes some of the pressure off of us with regard to following the state law and parking.
I mean, the only
I go
option
with
is to
that.
go down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
The only
I go
option
with
is to
that.
eliminate it.
Let's follow the state.
I don't think you're ready to eliminate it.
So we good with
Yeah,
state law?
yeah.
Okay. Next item is owner occupancy. Should we, hold on. Should we require some, I guess should we require some owner occupancy either in the principal or in the ADU?
Yes,
Yes.
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 That one's an easy one.
I would say yes too, although I would create a scenario. What if we have a property owner who has constructed an ADU already? They have a separate standalone ADU. Then they leave and rent their unit, their house. We're going to have a vacant ADU. But that's, I guess, just the way it is.
Yep,
Yes.
Okay?
that's a problem.
Okay. We will have-
I mean, otherwise we're just creating hostels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess the follow-up there was, in terms of short-term rentals, should we require that?
Minimum 30 days.
Minimum 30 days. I would say yes.
I'd like to go longer than that, but if you get a lousy tenant and you want to be able to kick them out after 30 days, I don't want to keep somebody from being able to do that. But yeah, I don't want to encourage Airbnbs of,
So minimum 30 day?
yeah,
So right now, there's no minimum.
We don't have any.
right.
I would think if we don't have the minimum 30-day requirement, we could be encouraging people to not build ADUs for housing, but to build ADUs for Airbnb rental incomes. That I want to regulate, because we don't have any regulations that collect taxes on that or any of that stuff. But
How do we enforce that?
we don't. If and when it becomes a problem, we could
When we
create
get a
ordinance.
complaint, we'll have to do
regulate.
something. There are a few in Clayton already. But so far, they're fairly quiet in their neighborhoods, and they haven't created any problems, so.
It's fine.
Minimum 30.
30.
Okay. Anything else you need on that?
No.
Okay. Appeals. Should we provide a process so that a staff decision on an ADU, whether it's positive or negative, can be appealed to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council?
Yes.
Yes, I think we should have something in place. So.
I mean, it's essentially formalizing a process.
Right. I'm fully in favor of having appeal process. That gives a venue to the residents or neighbors or whatnot. And I guess that would be the standard process, Planning Commission and then Council. And then item 9 is the junior accessory dwelling units. So now we'll get into.
Okay, well, I guess I've been kind of outvoted there already with regard to this. So I will rescind my former comments because it's been made clear that a junior ADU could be just about anything that's already existing in a home, and why anybody would apply for this aside from going faster through the process won't make much sense. Yeah.
I think the only thing is, though, that if we allow junior ADUs, they don't count towards our RENO numbers. So from a city's perspective, if we did not allow junior units, that could encourage more people to apply for ADUs, which then could benefit the city from a RENO number perspective.
Doesn't the agenda package says that they do count?
Oh.
Did I read
they
that
do.
wrong?
The
Sorry.
internal ADUs do count.
Well, we're talking about just the juniors.
Just the juniors. Yeah.
Just the juniors. I'll need to check that.
That's what it says.
Yeah, I'll need to check that.
But in any event, I don't see the advantage for us to create this process for junior ADUs. You could already have, if we go forward with 150 square feet, you could already have these tiny ones. The only thing that it does is provide a different approval avenue. And I would say no. And just have them all go through the same process to make it consistent.
I think the only advantage of calling it a junior ADU as there is no utility connection fees required. Is that right?
You're right, but even for the repurposed internal,
Right.
there would
They
not
can't change it.
be the connection fee either. So I think that what might be helpful on the junior ADUs is for us to come back with more information on the junior ADUs, because I'm hearing from you, and it's, this is very valid. In terms of the repurposed internal ADU and the junior ADU, what are the advantages of one over the other? And as we talk about, say, a minimum at 150, for example, internal, I think what I'd like to do is to do a little more research on the junior ADUs and be able to report back to the commission and yourselves in terms of the repurposed internal, given the standard, the 150 that you're talking about in terms of a minimum size. What might be the advantages to have the junior ADU or not? Why would you want it, or maybe why wouldn't you want it? But let's research that a little bit more and come back.
Okay. I do have a question. So and this goes now to the next item then, which is the connection fees. But when you say, so you would not charge connection fees if you had an existing attached or accessory structure that gets converted to an ADU? So does that mean existing as of the date before the effective date of this ordinance, or existing before you apply for an ADU?
Well, with the date of the ordinance, again, in terms of effective date of the provisions, that should be drafted within the ordinance, and that can vary based on how you draft the ordinance, number one. But in terms of the connection fees, what we're learning from the state basically is that if you have an existing structure and you put an internal ADU into that, you can't then require a separate connection or connection fees for that internal ADU. That's what we've read. That's what we provided to you.
And that applies to standard ADUs as well as junior ADUs. There's no real difference there.
I don't think there's a real difference. And by the way, those requirements not only apply to jurisdictions like the city of Clayton, but they also apply to other districts. So a water district would have to follow that requirement as well. So if there's another purveyor, another provider of the service based on state law, they would need to honor that as well. And then again, in terms of the detached second units, as we talked earlier this evening, there's a proportionality that needs to be determined, and that's to be determined, and we've spoken about that already this evening, and it would be really, to a large extent, other agencies that would need to do that work. We'll try to research that, though, and provide back some information on that to you.
Yeah. With regard to that, when we were looking at doing the addition to our house for my dad when he came to live with us, it was an addition to the existing house.
Mm-hmm.
And then we didn't have the protections of any of these rules. So it's basically a separate apartment without the full kitchen, because had we put in the full kitchen, PG&E wanted a separate meter. Mm-hmm. Sewer company wanted a separate lateral. Mm-hmm. And the water company wanted a separate meter as well. And pretty soon we were at $60,000 in connection fees, which is what we're trying to get away from with all this legislation. Mm-hmm. So I think some information from PG&E about what they would require for a detached unit to be built for connection fees for electric, gas. I mean, obviously, inspection fees or something like that I would expect to be part of the construction process. But I want to clarify that they're not charging a separate meter that you can come off of the meter of the main house.
For a detached facility.
For a detached. I know that attached, they don't have a choice. It has to come off
Right.
for within the same unit.
But
Now.
you're saying for detached.
Yeah.
Did you say that detached?
If you're repurposing an existing structure or building a separate structure in the backyard, are we safe from that? Because as I remember at the time, it was a huge fee
Well, no, what
for
they're-
new meters.
What they're saying is that it has to be proportional.
I understand. I also understand who we're dealing with.
And I might add too, I mean, I think the question is, because I remember when I built my standalone structure in the rear yard that required a lot of electricity because it had a sauna in it, the idea of upgrading my electrical system was very cost prohibitive, and we maneuvered some ovens and whatnot to put them in gas as opposed to electric in order to stay within the loads. But so I guess the question is, if you have a detached structure, if it's a dwelling, an ADU, does that mean something different from PG&E's perspective? In other
Or
words,
can you run through the main house as long as the service panels are adequate?
Yeah, that's a question we can ask, but in the state provisions that we've been reading, really the idea is that the detached structure could have separate connections. But the idea is that in terms of charges, that they should not be the equivalent of the primary structure. So I'll use the number of $20,000. If you're paying $20,000 for a particular connection for your primary dwelling unit, then as you would do a detached structure, ADU, then there should be some reduction in charges. And then we get into this whole aspect of proportionality, and that's something we would have to, discuss with other agencies. That's
okay. That would be great to know. And from a PG&E's perspective, I would just like to know if it is a separate ADU, do they then require separate service somehow or something? Anyway, so I think it's the same question. Okay. Are there any other items that any of you would like to add?
I would just make one comment that San Mateo County has put together a second unit pamphlet and website that is absolutely above and beyond anything anyone else in the area has done. It is informational. It talks about how to plan, gives you a bunch of ideas on what to do. I'm sure David's familiar with it. It's called Second Unit Center, SMC, sanmataocounty.org. I'd recommend it to just go take a look and get some ideas about the possibilities for second units. And I mean, it's everything from little tiny, internal, detached, all that kind of thing, but it gives an idea on process, what's involved, how to get it done, what do you do for planning, and it's a tremendous resource. And having talked to some of the folks involved, I think that our county would be well served to poach off of that and adapt it as we need to. But it answers some basic questions about what are accessory units and what can be done, and gives you some great ideas for how to make them really work in the community.
Okay. Seeing none, is there anything else, any other direction you need from us?
That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Then we'll move on to item number 9, which is a question as to whether any of the council members have any items, direct requests for future meetings.
I do.
We did earlier.
Right after we went through the PowerPoint. Chris got up and spoke, and we could let her speak.
Do you want to speak to that? I'll reopen public comment. Go ahead.
Ann Stanaway, 1553 Haviland Place. One and only one thing, I think Jeff made a very good point when he talked about rezoning, backdoor rezoning. Because what we're looking at is we're looking at taking a single-family zoned property and making it multifamily. Well, that's fine, and it's good for the state, and, you know, it develops housing and all that kind of good stuff. But from a consumer standpoint, I would never, ever, ever buy in a community that did that to their properties, because nobody has to disclose that. You could move into a house that you felt was, you bought it as a single-family house, and your neighbor has some accessory building that she's renting or he's renting or whatever. And so what you have is you have a single-family home, you have a multifamily home, and you didn't even know it. Now, I never intend to live in a multifamily community, and so therefore I would be very wary about buying anything in California anymore. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and we'll close public comment and on that item. So item number 9, any future requests?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd like to request a future public hearing to discuss potential improvements to traffic and pedestrian safety around our middle and elementary schools. Yourself and myself, I guess, are members of the MDSD subcommittee, but safety on the roads, including traffic and pedestrian safety, are not the purview of the school district. It's rather the city itself. So I think it's relevant for us to have that hearing so that we can get the ideas and potential future action, if any, that we would wish to take.
Can I have Mr. Napper comment on that? Because I know we have, after the incident, I think there was a number of emails we talked about, whether it's the school district, whether it's the city engineer, the police department. Any thoughts on?
Well, the school, as indicated earlier to you, the school district doesn't have jurisdiction over our streets. Neither are they the ones who declare the safe routes to schools. So it does fall within the purview of the city, and if Councilmember Juan desires to have, he called it a public hearing, but every item is a comment item, and so this one would be like under action items. But if you want to talk about it, or my initial discussions with the traffic engineer is he doesn't know that any additional signage would help, that there might be some additional barriers for some of where the kids are walking and so forth, but that can be open for discussion.
Do you want to have it as a public hearing, or do you want to, because we are still part of the committee, for the school district committee, do you want us to maybe meet with staff first and explore some ideas, or?
I think we can do both simultaneously. But I think the important part for me is that the discussion is that everyone has a chance to comment, and we can get feedback in an environment where people are able to speak and get ideas. I think that's the goal. I mean, we can continue to talk and with whatever relevant parties, but I do think giving the public forum to folks is worthwhile.
Okay, why don't you and I talk separately offline and see if it makes sense for us to meet with staff first and kind of see, and then maybe bring it back to the full commission, council? You okay with that?
I'm not sure how that's different than is that different than what I'm saying?
I think you said proceed with, yeah, I mean, let's have, you and I have a conversation first, and then thereafter, if needed, bring it back.
Sure. I mean, I think regardless, I do think that there's a public interest in pursuing it. So regardless of whatever we come up, even if we think that the solution is perfectly clear and that there's only one available option, I would still say that I think it's worthwhile to have that opportunity for people to speak. So.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Yep. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Catalano. I have an item that is probably a future council agenda item, and if you'll allow me a little bit of indulgence, we're in the month of April, and it was many moons ago in the month of April that a young graduate student walked into the city manager's office in the city of Orange and nailed an interview and got a paid administrative internship. 7 years later, in the month of April, that same individual became the city manager of the city of Morro Bay. And now here we are 35 years later in the month of April, and I'm informing you of my intent to retire at the end of this July. So I tell you that to give you advance notice, because there will be some additional requirements on your part to decide, in which those decisions have to be publicly made regarding whether you wish to try an in-house recruitment, or whether you wish to hire an executive search firm to assist you in that process. My employment agreement with the city requires only a 30-day notice, so I'll give that in sufficient time. There's some requirements that I'm having to pursue right now for retirement purposes, but I wanted to advance that to you so you can have the opportunity to begin to commence that, and I would assume that, Mayor, you would want to have that probably on the next agenda for yourselves to discuss. I realize that there's some in the community that are, probably jumping up and down and are thrilled right now about that announcement, or they will be when they hear it. But I can tell you that there is no one that is more thrilled than my wife. After 35 years of giving up Tuesdays, after 35 years of giving up Friday night evenings as we're preparing agenda packets after hours, even when we're on vacation and traveling, I'm hooked up, wired up and everything else. So I just think the timing is right. I also think that we have a community development director position that is open, and as I've thought about it, I think that merits to have perhaps a new city manager select that individual. So there's some timing issues to be considered that may require an interim city manager before you are actually able to make that selection. So if that's a surprise to you, my apologies, but it's not a surprise to me, as I've been thinking about it for quite a while. So with your indulgent, Mayor, I'll look forward to putting that on the next agenda.
Can I scrape the last 4 minutes off the record?
Can you scrub the tape?
I think we can refuse putting that on the agenda.
Is that 29? Did you say 2019? Or is that 2022? No.
No, I didn't. I know exactly what that calendar looks like, but thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, on that upbeat note.
Yeah, I know.
That'll give you something to think about.
Yeah, thank you for that information, though. Okay, move on to closed session. We have none, which means we're adjourned to April 16th. Thank you.